Chapter 634. Some people said that animals knew how to be grateful more than humans. Perhaps Andre would have scoffed at this in the past, but now that he saw the big cat's sad look, he suddenly felt that it was not unreasonable. At least animals did not have as many complicated thoughts as humans, and they would not choose to betray for benefits. They followed their primitive instincts, and whoever was good to them, they would be good to them. Perhaps the Black Panther's howl was too loud, or perhaps the sound of the iron chain being cut had awakened the unconscious Jesse. In short, he slowly opened his eyes and tried to identify the target in the darkness. At the same time, he asked with a trembling voice, "Who is it? Who is there? Please don't torture me. I'm just a worthless pawn, a bait to attract the big fish. I don't know anything." Hearing the liar's fearful pleading, Andre couldn't help but smile and shake his head. He deliberately replied in an aria tone, "Dear Jesse, relax. I'm not here to torture your enemy, but to save your friend. You must know that in order to kill that old man, I've lost more than 300 elites. The outside of the cave is full of corpses. Don't you think you should express your gratitude? It's you. Oh, damn it, damn it, damn it. You're finally here. God, I thought I was going to die this time. Quick, put me down." More than 10 hours of torture did not damage Jesse's hearing ability. Although he couldn't see anything now, he could still recognize the voice at once. He screamed excitedly, and his whole person was like a madman, desperately struggling, and did not care that his wrists were bloody because of the shackles. But it was no wonder. After all, not everyone could face death and torture calmly, unless they had an extremely strong faith and were willing to sacrifice everything for it. Jesse was a liar who believed in the god of lies and deceit, Keel. For a person like him, not to mention being imprisoned in a pitch-black cave for more than 10 hours, even if there was a knife on his neck, he would be scared to the point of peeing his pants. Not to mention sacrificing for anyone, he was more willing to sacrifice others to save his own life. Andre enjoyed the sight of Jesse struggling with interest, and then said in a half-joking tone, "Be quiet, my friend. I can't cut the shackles with you like this. Also, before I let you down, I want to ask you one more thing. Did you sell any information about me?" Following this sentence, Jesse, who was still twisting his body, suddenly calmed down. His legs that were suspended in midair also began to twitch slightly. Sweat covered his forehead in just a few seconds, and his eyes were so nervous that he didn't even dare to blink. After a full 2 to 3 minutes, he nodded bitterly. "Yes, I told him everything I know. There's nothing I can do about it. They're just too scary. They're simply demons, especially that old guy." He cut open the stomach of the lady next to me while she was still alive. If you light the torch, you can see her miserable state. I don't have the guts to say it, so please don't kill me. For someone who had just survived a calamity, there was nothing more terrifying than having to face death again. As a professional swindler, Jesse knew very well what it meant to betray someone who was countless times stronger than him. Therefore, he couldn't help but feel fear from the bottom of his heart. He didn't think that someone who could carry out such an unscrupulous massacre would be kind. He was afraid that he would enter the wolf's den after leaving the tiger's den. You really found a perfect excuse for yourself. But you have to understand that no matter what you do, you have to pay the corresponding price. I can't forgive you, and I can also ignore your previous betrayal. But what compensation can you give me? Andre asked playfully. In fact, he didn't expect Jesse to keep the secret from the beginning. He just used him as a bait. The so-called test wasn't to test his loyalty, but to test whether he could survive under harsh conditions. At present, this guy was doing well. Perhaps he was a little embarrassed, but he had successfully saved his life. Of course, Andre wouldn't encourage this kind of behavior that betrayed others to save oneself. He still had to give a warning, otherwise, it would become a habit in the future. What he needed was an all-round diplomatic talent who could negotiate, mediate, and even deceive with most forces at any time, any place, and under any circumstances. He wasn't a coward who would change his mind at the slightest danger. However, Jesse didn't know Andre's plan. After hearing that he wouldn't be killed immediately, he instantly collapsed and cried bitterly, "Thank you. Thank you for your kindness. I understand. I understand. From now on, I'm willing to do anything for you. In order to survive, he couldn't care so much at the moment. He betrayed himself without thinking. As for whether he would regret it in the future, that was a matter for the future. Now he just wanted to escape from this nightmare. Looking at Jesse's collapsed expression in the dark, Andre knew that this guy was really scared. Maybe it left a big psychological shadow. He wouldn't dare to have the thought of betraying for a long time. A satisfied smile quickly appeared on his face. Very well, I'm very satisfied with your answer. Remember, this is the first time I've forgiven you, and it's also the last time. If there's a second time, I promise that death is just the beginning. You will taste something more terrible than death. Remember, I swear there will never be a next time. Jesse tried his best to show a loyal look. He didn't hesitate to swear. Swear? Ha ha. Forget it. Who knows what will happen in the future? Andre smiled indifferently. He waved his mithril machete and directly cut off the shackles hanging in the air. He wouldn't believe the oath made by a follower of the god of lies and deceit, Keel. He also didn't think that such an oath would come true. The reason was very simple. Keel himself held the clergy of lying. He always encouraged his followers to deceive others. When necessary, he would even provide them with shelter. Mortals who believed in him could get a special ability. If the oath made was not consistent with their inner thoughts, there was a certain chance that the oath would not come true. Compared to an illusory oath, Andre was more willing to believe in the combination of interests and his own controlling means. As long as he could give the other party benefits that they couldn't refuse, coupled with his own powerful strength, this liar would naturally do his best to do everything well. With the sound of the iron chain breaking, Jesse fell down with a plop and just happened to bump into the big cat that was silently crying. Chapter 635. Instantly, the man and the leopard both jumped up in fright and took a few steps back at the same time. The latter glared with its two green eyes and let out a threatening growl, while the former leaned against the stone wall and screamed, "Oh, oh my God, what is this? What kind of monster is this? Help, help me." Black leopards were not a native species in the southern subtropical forests and islands, but they were large cats that lived in the northern coniferous forests, mountains, grasslands, deserts, and other cold temperate zones. Therefore, as a southerner, it was normal for jays to not recognize it, especially with those two big yellow eyes that were glowing green in the dark. Any normal person would jump up in fright. Calm down, my friend. If you sense it carefully, you will realize that this lady of the animal kingdom has no intention of attacking you. Otherwise, do you think you would still be alive and screaming? Large cats are the best at sneak attacks and ambushes. They can often pounce on their target and bite off their prey's neck in just a few tenths of a second. So be quiet now. As he spoke, Andre took 2 steps forward and gently stroked the brain's neck, comforting its slightly irritable mood due to excessive sadness. Damn it, I don't care if it's a lady of the animal kingdom or not. Just keep it away from me. Jays would not let down his guard against a jungle killer that weighed more than 100 kilograms and whose teeth and claws could easily tear through bones just because of a few words. In order to ensure that he would not be suddenly pounced on and bitten, he quickly distanced himself by more than 5 meters. Sigh, what a boring person who has no taste and doesn't know how to appreciate beautiful things. All right, I'll keep this elegant lady away from you. Andre pretended to sigh helplessly and let the big cat take a few steps back. He did not hide the disdain in his eyes. Although the Orier was filled with all kinds of strange and incredible plants and animals, a black leopard that could understand the common language and could help a lot in battle was a rare breed, no matter how one looked at it. It was believed that if it appeared in Lincoln City, many nobles would be willing to spend a lot of money to buy it as their pet and bodyguard. Nobles' way of thinking was completely different from normal people's. They were willing to spend a lot of money for something they liked. Not to mention other places, just in the Lincoln City pet market, a pure-blooded adult crawl hound usually sold for about 500 to 1,000 gold coins. They had thick bones and muscles, and their teeth were sharp enough to bite through metal chains as thick as fingers. Their combat power was not much worse than that of warriors below level 3. Almost every rich family would raise 1 or 2 dogs. Not only could they show off when they went out to hunt, but they could also protect the safety of their family and property. Most importantly, these fierce dogs were loyal to their owners and would never betray them. They were deeply loved by the upper class. The intelligence of the Krar hounds wasn't high. To be exact, it was a little low. They couldn't understand complex commands and gestures, and often made jokes about accidentally biting servants to death. But even so, their prices were still high. Think about it. How much was a black leopard that could match 2 or even 3 Krar hounds worth in the eyes of the nobles? Although it wasn't a magical creature, under the training of the former mistress, it had long been able to fight as well as a magical creature. Andre felt that even if it faced an adult winter wolf, the black leopard could at least fight to a draw. Seeing the 2 green eyes of the big cat slowly retreating to the corner, Jess finally let out a sigh of relief. He sat on the ground and said helplessly, "If it's boring, then it's boring. As long as I can keep my life, it's fine. After going through this disaster, I've thought it through. No money, reputation, women, wine, or food in the world is more important than my life. As long as I can keep my life, I'm willing to do anything. Also, if you have any questions, you can ask now. I promise to tell you everything I know." It had to be said that he was very tactful, and at the same time understood where his greatest value lay. Without a doubt, Andre was quite interested in the organization behind Sam. After a moment's consideration, he immediately nodded in agreement. Not a bad suggestion. I happen to have some time as well. Let's talk about their origins. I believe that with your brain, you'll be able to get a lot of useful information out of them in the next 10 or so hours. We'll do it bit by bit. A lot? Huh. You really think highly of me. Jess shook his head with a wry smile. Sorry, these guys are very tight-lipped. I don't know where they're from, nor do I know their goal. I only know that they call themselves the Black Blade, and seem to be searching for something important in Valen City. How many? How many people do they have? How strong are they? Where are they hiding? Andre obviously wasn't satisfied with such a general answer, and immediately pressed on with a frown. Jess spread out his hands helplessly. Unfortunately, I've been whipped ever since I was kidnapped, so I didn't have the energy to pay attention to the details. But from the conversation a few hours ago, there shouldn't be many of them, probably no more than 15. They're all warriors, and the guy who kidnapped me seemed to have an injury on his left ear. There's a very obvious scar on his outer ear. As for their strength, I can only say that they're very strong, but far from that old guy's level. I believe that if you can get rid of that old guy, you can definitely get rid of the others. Hearing these words, the corner of Andre's mouth couldn't help but twitch. The reason he was able to get rid of the Weapon Master Sam was based on the fact that more than 300 elites had been wiped out. If a second one appeared, he'd definitely run as far as he could. At least at the current stage, he didn't have absolute confidence in defeating a killing machine that was above level 15 and had mastered countless powerful combat techniques. Especially since the Black Blade had been collecting the manuscripts of the Master Swordsman, Johannes Richard Turner. This meant that their members could learn the techniques of legendary warriors, making them even harder to deal with than ordinary warriors outside. Judging from Sam's level of swordsmanship, as long as the distance was within 15 meters, the spellcaster wouldn't even have the chance to chant an incantation, apart from instantaneous spells or magical items. All right, although the amount of information is much less than I expected, you've given me another clue, so I can continue to investigate. Now, pick up the corpse on your right. We're leaving. With that, Andre turned around and walked straight towards the entrance of the cave. He'd already gotten what he wanted and naturally wouldn't continue to linger in this dark, damp, and oppressive place. Chapter 636. Damn it, I'm a wounded person, and I hate carrying corpses. Jesse complained in a low voice and quickly touched the female corpse not far from him. He carried her on his shoulder and followed closely behind. Because there was no light, the eyes of the Black Panther were the markers he used to identify the direction. If he was careless and lost, he might be trapped inside. Well, don't talk so much nonsense. The whip marks on your body are not injuries at all. They will scab in 2 or 3 days at most. Andre looked back at the swindler who was struggling to walk and comforted him. In his view, the whip was never a deadly weapon, otherwise it would not be used in torture and punishment. The most terrible thing about whip wounds was not the open wounds, but the symptoms of decay and pus caused by bacterial infection. Coupled with the high fever, it was tantamount to a death sentence in a relatively backward area. However, the wounds on Jesse's body were very shallow, and there were no symptoms of infection. He would be fine after a simple scrub with boiled water. Therefore, other than the fact that the whip consumed a lot of physical strength, he was basically no different from a normal person. 2 people and a panther squeezed through the narrow tunnel and quickly returned to the entrance of the cave. Just as they breathed in the fresh air outside, Jesse was instantly stunned by the bloody scene under the moonlight. Corpses, mutilated corpses, were everywhere. Broken limbs, internal organs, and brains were mixed together, presenting a scene that only appeared in purgatory. Tremble. Fear. He could no longer control his emotions. He knelt down and muttered to himself, "Oh, God, my God, it's terrible. They were all killed by that old guy. How is this possible? Can a mortal do this?" Andre took a deep breath of the bloody air and replied with a blank expression, "Yes, they were all killed by Sam." In front of a senior professional, the number of people is no longer a factor to determine the outcome. Remember the scene well. They're the price I paid to save you. If one day you choose to betray me, then I promise that this scene will be repeated, and it will be even more bloody and cruel. No, it won't. I didn't expect that old guy to be so terrible. You must be even more terrible to be able to kill him. I don't have the guts to betray you." Jesse couldn't help but shudder, his eyes full of fear. He originally thought that the young man in front of him had done something crazy in the Hiccup Dragon Tavern, but today he realized that it was just an appetizer. The more exciting part was yet to come. "Oomph, I hope you can keep your word. Now, go pick up a weapon, dig a hole here, and bury the body you're carrying." With that said, Andre patted the big cat's head and signaled it to stay. He then walked toward the boulder not far away. After being treated by the siblings, the high-ranking members of the Shadow Web had woken up from their coma. They were lying on the smooth stones to recover their strength. Their faces were pale and bloodless. Especially Teresa. The left side of her chest had been pierced through by the giant sword. Blood had dyed her clothes completely red. If it had been just a little bit more, the aorta connected to her heart would have been cut off. At that time, unless there was a senior priest who could use 6th-level divine spells, no one could stop her from dying. Seeing Andre coming from afar, the executioner Herman, who was relatively lightly injured, hurriedly stood up and bowed deeply with one hand on his chest. "I'm very sorry, Your Excellency. I've disappointed you tonight. Please punish me." And me. Although I'm not reconciled, I have to admit that if it weren't for Your Excellency, we would have been defeated. The fat sorcerer who weighed more than 200 pounds also struggled to sit up and took the initiative to apologize. Elf is right. The enemy this time was a bit beyond our imagination. As the feet of the Shadow Web, we didn't realize that there was such a terrible organization lurking around. So we failed to do our duty. I'll accept whatever punishment you give me. Teresa endured the pain and agreed with a bitter face. In fact, when they said these words, they were ready to face death calmly. One of the main functions of the Shadow Web was the collection and transmission of information. Although they occasionally infiltrated, bribed, roped in, and even subverted the regime, those were all incidental. Intelligence was always the first priority. Once there was a big mistake in intelligence work, the punishment from top to bottom would not be light. Andre suddenly burst into laughter when he saw the 3 of them looking at him with uneasy eyes. "Ha ha 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 ha. Stupid. I have to say that your stupidity is really beyond my imagination. Do you know why the enemy could lurk around you for decades without being discovered? The reason is simple. It's selfishness. Selfishness without a bottom line. Everyone stared at the pitiful benefits in front of them, guarded against each other, fought against each other, and never shared secrets. What's more, you even summoned a succubus to deal with your own people. I really don't know if I should praise you for being too smart or if your brains have been stuffed with feces. Indeed, with the current performance, each of you should be punished, the most severe punishment. But considering that we still need manpower for the next operation, I'll note this down for the time being. After the plan succeeds, I'll settle the score according to your performance. Remember, this is your last chance to atone for your sins. Uhtred has already paid the price for his actions. If any of you want to continue playing tricks, then I don't mind using his head as a warning to his successor. Following the sharp sarcasm and warning, Teresa and the fat warlock elf immediately lowered their heads in shame, listening without a word. They didn't even have the slightest thought of resisting. As for Herman, he kept nodding his head. He was the only one who didn't participate in the internal strife, so his attitude was very calm. In fact, it wasn't that Andre didn't want to take the opportunity to carry out a larger-scale purge, but after the bitter battle, the shadow web had already suffered a huge blow. Not to mention the annihilation of more than 300 elites. Just the deaths of David and Uhtred had caused a serious lack of high-end strength. He could only make do with a warning. After all, the biggest enemies at the moment didn't come from within, but from the underground guilds that ruled Valen City, as well as the pirate alliance that was about to set sail and attack Lincoln City's fleet. Only after dealing with these two enemies would Andre officially carry out the purge, eliminating all uncontrollable factors and turning the Sardinia into his own backyard. Chapter 637. Hearing that they had escaped the calamity for the time being, the three of them breathed a sigh of relief at the same time and secretly exchanged glances with each other. Although they were ready to accept their punishment and had even taken the initiative to admit their guilt, that was only to display an attitude of bravery in taking responsibility, so as to leave a good impression and not die too miserably. Uhtred's death made these unruly fellows suddenly understand that the young web weaver in front of them wasn't as friendly and amiable as he appeared to be. Especially at the critical moment, his murderous aura didn't hold back at all. Coupled with his temperamental personality, they decisively gave up resistance and chose to lay down their arms and surrender, gambling that they still had value and wouldn't be killed immediately. Evidently, their gamble paid off. Not only could Andre not kill any of them, he also had to fully delegate his authority. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to mobilize the Shadow Web's resources. If the Shadow Web's entire underground intelligence system was compared to a giant spider web, then Andre would be the spider's brain, while Herman and the others would be the spider's legs. Once he lost the support of his legs, not only would he be unable to use the web to hunt, he might even be trapped in the web himself. Unless he could find another leg to replace his previous one, he absolutely couldn't act rashly. Thank you for your benevolence, sir. Please rest assured that in the following plan, all of us will definitely discard our former enmity and work together. If any mistakes occur, we won't have the face to continue living even if you don't personally take action. After a brief silence, Teresa was the first to struggle to sit up and express her attitude while clutching her freshly bandaged wound. This was because she knew that after Uhtred's death, the danger of being annexed no longer existed. The power vacuum left behind was enough for everyone to get a share of the pie. Adding to the fact that they were facing a great enemy, there was no longer any meaning in fighting. Elf hurriedly nodded in agreement. That's right. I swear I won't disappoint you again. I've said many times that compared to these empty words, I prefer practical actions. Now, go back and prepare. When the pirate fleet leaves the port tomorrow morning, mobilize all of your forces and throw Valen City into complete chaos. The time for the decisive battle is about to arrive, but before that, I plan to warm up the atmosphere with some appetizers. This will also serve as a test for you. After speaking, Andre's signature smile appeared on his face. It was as if he could already see the entire city slowly falling into the abyss. It wouldn't be long before the underground guild lost control of their subordinate guilds. When that time came, countless ambitious fellows would become the first line of cannon fodder to complete the task of diverting attention. As you wish, sir. When night falls tomorrow, I'll definitely let you see a different Valen City. The corners of Teresa's mouth rose slightly, her eyes shining with excitement. As the master of countless spies, She loved these kinds of assassination and sabotage missions the most. Only such missions could show her importance to the greatest extent, so she was eager to give it a try. It's finally time for me to unleash my power. Just thinking about it makes me excited. I think we should hold a small celebration. For example, how about setting the entire downtown area on fire? Elf was immediately energized at the mention of sabotage and destruction. He was a warlock, and due to the specialty of his profession, he didn't know as many spells as a mage. However, he could cast an insane amount of spells, so he wasn't suited for one-on-one battles. On the contrary, the more people there were, the more chaotic the situation, the more power he could display. If Andre was compared to an all-around tank that could adapt to all kinds of climates and terrains, then Elf would be a heavy cannon. The former had excellent mobility, defensive armor, and firepower, with almost no obvious weaknesses. The latter, on the other hand, only had great firepower. Once he was discovered by the enemy, he would basically be forced to retreat. However, a single shot from his cannon could cause terrifying damage. It was precisely because of this that this poor fatty had been the focus of Sam's attention the moment they'd clashed. He'd lost the ability to fight in just a few minutes, which was truly a bit depressing. Thus, he really wanted to set a fire to vent the depression in his heart. It was obvious that Andre would never agree to such an action. Setting a fire might be easy, but suppressing the spread of the fire was very difficult. If the fire didn't go well, half of Valen City would be gone. There would be no meaning even if they occupied it. Thinking of this, he waved his hand without hesitation. No. You can kill, but you can't set a fire. Remember, we want to take over the city in one piece, not destroy it. Do you understand? Understood. Your orders are the truth. Elf immediately lost his enthusiasm when he heard that he couldn't set a fire. He nodded listlessly and then fell silent. Andre didn't pay attention to the moody fatty and said directly to Executioner Herman, I have an important mission for you. Find a person with an obvious scar on his left ear. Don't be in a hurry to alert him after you find him. Observe him for a while and find out who he usually communicates with and report back to me in a timely manner. No problem. I'll have my subordinates dig him out as soon as possible. Also, if you don't mind, can I ask how you plan on dealing with these corpses? You should know that this place isn't too far from Valen City. If we don't deal with them, they'll be easily discovered. Herman carefully reminded. As an executioner, his responsibility was to eliminate all factors that could lead to the organization being exposed. Therefore, he was especially concerned about this. I don't know. Do you have any good suggestions? Andre glanced at the scattered corpses and asked back with a frown. Herman shrugged his shoulders indifferently. My suggestion is for you to give me full authority to deal with this. I guarantee that there won't be any traces of fighting before dawn. Looking at the brawny man's confident eyes, Andre immediately agreed. All right, then you'll be in charge of cleaning up. Clean up all traces of fighting. However, I have an additional request, and that is to gather all the weapons and armor and hide them in the cave. Can you do that? It's a simple mission. I guarantee that I'll finish it before the sun rises. Even though he looked like a burly man, Herman wasn't as simple as he looked. He seemed to know his limits and did his best to do his job well. He didn't ask anything that shouldn't be asked. If it were Kent, he would definitely ask why these weapons and armor were hidden and what they were used for. However, Herman didn't ask a single question and didn't even show the slightest bit of curiosity. Chapter 638. After assigning their respective tasks, Herman, Elf, and Teresa supported each other as they embarked on the path back to their respective strongholds. For them, tonight was a thrilling night. Not only was there the humiliation of being completely defeated by Sam alone, but there was also the opportunity brought about by Uhtred's death. Everyone needed to reconsider their positions and how they should perform next to ensure that their positions would not be shaken or even go one step further. Watching the three of them disappear from his sight, Andre immediately rubbed his eyebrows and slowly relaxed his tense nerves. His high concentration for a long time had caused his brain to overload, especially during the battle just now. If there was even the slightest mistake, it would have led to unpredictable consequences. Now, he had finally reached his limit. A strong feeling of dizziness and nausea welled up in his heart, followed by his vision becoming blurry and clear at times. He looked as if he was drunk and showed signs of unsteady standing. After Mabel, who was standing not far away, noticed this, she immediately ran over and asked with concern, "Buddy, what's wrong with you? Are you hurt anywhere?" "I'm fine. I'm just a little tired," Andre replied with a wave of his hand. As a soul from the era of information explosion, he was very clear about his body's reaction. All of this was caused by the lack of blood supply to the brain or the lack of oxygen to the brain. It'd be alleviated with a few minutes of rest. "Are you sure? Maybe I should let my sister take a look at you. She's now a qualified priestess." Mabel was obviously still a little worried. After all, from the moment he made up his mind to escape from the Sardinia Islands, he had entrusted his and Fiona's lives and future to Andre. Therefore, he would definitely not be happy to see any accidents happen. "There's no need for that. Just help me sit on the rock over there for a while." Andre resisted the discomfort and pointed to a rock not far away. "All right, since you insist." Seeing that Andre's face was getting paler and paler, Mabel did not continue to say anything. She quickly helped him to the rock and sat down. At the same time, she waved at the halfling bandit closest to her. Portia, who was still in a dilemma over which magical item she should choose, immediately ran over with a large pile of loot. She asked with a puzzled expression, "What's going on? Did something happen?" "See for yourself." Mabel smiled bitterly as she glanced at Andre, who was resting with his eyes closed. He didn't think that such a severe adverse reaction was a small matter. He planned to let the most experienced thief in the team see if they needed to take any measures. "Oh, damn it, your face is really ugly." Noticing Andre's pale face, Portia immediately realized the severity of the situation. She pressed 2 fingers on the side of her neck and felt the pulse. After a full minute, she heaved a sigh of relief. There shouldn't be any major problems. Although his pulse is a little weak for the time being, it's slowly returning to normal. It's probably because he's exhausted. It's good that he's fine. Didn't you see that he couldn't even stand properly just now? It was really a little scary. Hearing that he was fine, Mabel's tense emotions finally relaxed. She sat down on a rock and threw the shield and weapon in her hands to the side. Although he didn't participate in the fierce battle from the beginning to the end, he had exhausted a lot of his physical strength. Especially when he had helped to stop the bleeding and bandage the wound, he couldn't help but feel a little tired at this moment. Portia sneered and explained, "Rookie, don't make a fuss. It's normal to be exhausted or even faint after a battle. Usually, you can recover most of your strength after a few minutes of rest. Moreover, the more difficult the enemy is to deal with, the higher the probability of this happening. On one hand, it's because you've exhausted too much of your physical strength. On the other hand, it's because you've overexerted your mental strength. Remember, if you don't want such a day to come, you have to learn how to allocate your physical strength reasonably during a battle. Just like that old man who died, use every bit of your physical strength at the crucial moment. Only then can you erupt with 200% of your combat strength. Even if you're facing an enemy several times your size, you can still win." "I see." The young man thoughtfully stroked the stubble on his chin and immediately memorized these words in his mind. As a true rookie warrior, he had not had any real combat experience so far. Therefore, he was very willing to accept any form of advice, even if these suggestions contained criticism and discrimination. Although he had personally killed Iron Fist Garrick, whose profession level wasn't low, not long ago, Mabel knew that it wasn't his own strength, but luck combined with the strength of an ogre after going berserk. He didn't even have a single memory of that time in his mind, let alone the so-called experience. The young man's humble acceptance greatly satisfied Portia's vanity. She immediately lightly kicked the 2 great swords beside her feet. "Here, which old man used these weapons? They're too heavy for ordinary people. They're all yours now." "For me?" Mabel was shocked. Her eyes widened as she looked at the complicated patterns on the swords, as well as the arcane light that flashed from time to time. Even if he didn't have much experience, he could still recognize that these two weapons were definitely not ordinary goods. That's right. They're for you. Pick them up and try to see if they fit. If they don't fit, I can still help you modify them. After a few minutes of rest, Andre finally opened his eyes. His pale face regained some color as he said with a smile, "Really? Are you sure it's appropriate for me to use magical weapons? I've heard that many powerful magical tools have very high requirements for their users. If they don't meet the requirements, they may be in danger." It could be seen that Mabel was very careful about things that she didn't understand. She wasn't like many adventurers who would lose their minds when they heard about magical tools. They simply didn't care about the consequences and just equipped themselves first. However, Andre appreciated this attitude very much. He patiently explained, "First of all, I want to commend you for your caution. That's right. Compared to ordinary people, magical tools are dangerous and fatal. It's best not to use them rashly before you fully understand all their functions. The reason is very simple. Due to the complexity of the manufacturing process, the higher the level of the magical tool, the easier it is to have flaws and curses. Even worse, it can cause irreparable harm to the user. So before you decide whether to use a magical tool, the first thing you have to do is to identify it." Chapter 639. Bastard, why didn't you say so earlier? Bordia, who had several magical items hanging on her body, jumped up and cursed loudly. At the same time, she quickly began to remove the ring on her finger. To a certain extent, she was a typical thief who thought that the more magical items she had, the better. She didn't even know the basic rules of wearing magical items. So when she heard that there was danger, she reacted very violently like a cat whose hair stood on end. Looking at the flustered appearance of the little one who was less than a meter tall, Andre couldn't help but laugh. "Ha ha! All right, relax. I guarantee that the magical items you are wearing are flawless, and there are no curses on them. Like I said before, not every magical item has a flaw, and not every magical item has specific requirements for the wearer. Let's give a simple example. Take the charm ring on your hand, for example. Its first function is to release Berserk Charm 3 times a day. The second function is that the glow emitted by the gem can hypnotize the target. The combination of the two can produce a very good effect. It can even brainwash and control the target unknowingly under the premise that the target is not vigilant. Generally speaking, compound magical items like this can only be used by mages. However, the creator of the ring is a genuine archmage. He used special craftsmanship. Even ordinary people can use it as long as they master the spell. There are no negative effects at all. Of course, most magical items are imperfect. For example, the old armor that Sam is wearing. If I'm not wrong, it should be a cursed item. I don't know why you didn't remove it, but I advise everyone not to touch it. Otherwise, it's hard to guarantee that nothing will happen." Cursed item? Bordia's exuberant curiosity flared up again. Her 2 eyes couldn't help but glance at the headless corpse in the distance. Andre nodded with a serious expression. "Yes, it's a cursed item. Pay attention to the surface of the armor. There isn't a single drop of blood on it. It's as if some kind of power has devoured all the blood. I don't know if you've noticed, but Sam's mental state is also affected to a certain extent. A warrior of his level shouldn't be so irritable, and sick. Perhaps these behaviors are caused by the curse. In fact, he didn't think that the curse of the armor was serious at first, but after seeing the female corpse in the cave, he instantly realized that the curse of the armor was far more terrifying than he had imagined. Judging from the disgusting traces, Sam had been raping her while peeling off her skin with a knife. This was no longer a simple act of bestial lust, but a complete pervert. Because other than pervert, Andre could not think of a second word to describe what he had done. Since there are so many disadvantages, why would he still wear that armor? Mabel asked with a puzzled expression. Andre stretched out 2 fingers and explained, "There are 2 possibilities. One is that Sam accidentally put on this armor and suddenly realized that he couldn't take it off. This is one of the biggest characteristics of all cursed items. The other is that the benefits brought by the armor are far greater than the curse itself. As for the specific benefits, I don't know yet, and I don't want to know it all. It sounds very scary, but I'm still curious about the magic of that armor. After saying that, the desire in Bosch's eyes became even stronger. Although she already knew the danger, she could not control her curiosity. The more dangerous and mysterious something was, the more it would attract the attention of the halflings. This was the nature of their race. It was said that the halflings were the only race that had the courage to face the dragons among all the races that lived on the surface. Although it sounded ridiculous, the halflings, who were less than a meter tall, actually dared to confront a colossus that was more than 3 stories tall and weighed several tons. Even the arrogant elves and stubborn dwarves did not dare to speak such arrogant words. But this was the truth. Everyone in the continent knew that the halflings had extraordinary courage. They might be cunning and greedy, but they were definitely not cowards. It was as if the Creator had made a big joke and stuffed the world's biggest courage into the smallest body. Andre did not know how many times he had seen the big-breasted lowly reveal such a scary expression. He sighed helplessly, Well, I'll satisfy your curiosity. Go and get that armor. I'll help you identify it. Remember, wear gloves and don't touch it directly. Thanks. After getting an affirmative answer, Boscha instantly dropped the things in her hands and rushed out, heading straight for Sam's headless body. Looking at her energetic appearance, Andre could not help but smile and shake his head. Then he said to the young man sitting beside him, "Pass those 2 great swords to me. I'll help you identify them and see what their names are." "Okay," Mabel answered cleanly. In the blink of an eye, she had picked up the heavy great swords. For ordinary people, heavy weapons needed 2 hands to move, but in his eyes they only had a little weight. Andre took one of the swords and quickly mobilized the magic energy in his body. He gently stroked the sword, and the detailed information quickly emerged in his vision. 2-handed destroyer, Hergram, greatsword +2. Every time it hits a target, it will cause strong acid damage to both hands. This weapon was made by a blacksmith who hated mages to the core, because he poured all his resentment into the weapon during the process of making it. No spellcaster can use it normally. After getting the exact information, he picked up the other one. Graham's blade, greatsword +2. Every time it hits the target, there's a chance of triggering the bleeding effect. Even if it's just a small cut, the injured target will bleed nonstop for a short period of time. This weapon is the favorite weapon of the infamous warrior, Graham. When he was alive, he liked to hide in the dark and sneak attack his opponents, and then wait for the bleeding effect to trigger before turning and running away. He would only turn around and deliver a fatal blow when his opponent fell to the ground due to excessive blood loss. Should I say, as expected of a high-ranking warrior, these 2 weapons are really not ordinary goods. Each of them actually has a history and a name. After looking at the information in his vision, the corners of Andre's mouth curled up slightly. He lowered his voice and muttered to himself. It was important to know that in Orire, every magical weapon with a name had a legend or story behind it. Such weapons were far more expensive than those that had just been made. If these 2 greatswords were taken to the auction house, just the starting price alone would be tens of thousands of gold coins. If the great nobles were interested, it would not be strange for the final price to be several times or even dozens of times higher. Chapter 640. Without a doubt, perhaps these 2 greatswords were used by Blackblade to recruit Sam, just like how many nobles would also prepare a good weapon or a set of glittering armor when recruiting feudal knights. For close combat professions, weapons were their second life. Many experts, in order to get their magic weapons, often did not hesitate to commit themselves to merchants or slave traders who reeked of money. This was because without a good weapon, they would not be able to display their strength. The higher the profession level of a warrior, the more dependent they would be on weapons and equipment. Without enough magic equipment, even a legendary warrior above level 20 would find it very difficult to injure a mage around level 10. Not to mention high-level spells for the time being, just a level 4 stone skin spell was enough to resist most physical attacks. The invisible field produced by the force wall spell was even more unsolvable for warriors. Unless they went around the side of the wall, or waited for the spell to disappear by itself, they would not be able to break through even if they were exhausted to death. One had to know that this was only a level 5 arcane spell. There were still levels 6 to 9, and above that, there were still frightening legendary spells. If Uhtred had not been too careless during the battle and had directly released the Force Wall spell stored in the Emerald Ring, then Sam would not even have had the chance to get close. Just like the saying goes, only they could defeat a mage. Uhtred had died in his own hands. Otherwise, if he had not been injured, Andre would not have dared to act blindly without thinking. Secretly reminding himself that he must not be careless in the future, Andre handed the 2 great swords to the youth beside him and said with a smile, "You are very lucky. These 2 weapons are very good." The reddish blade is called Gram's blade. It has the ability to make wounds bleed nonstop. The greenish blade is called Hegrim's Destroyer. As long as it hits the target, it will trigger a strong acid, burning the enemy's hands. Take them now and properly hone your martial arts. I hope that one day you can let these 2 great swords shine with dazzling brilliance again. Thank you. I will definitely not disappoint your expectations. Mabel excitedly received the 2 great swords. As if caressing a lover, she gently stroked the blades, her fondness for them overflowing with words. He simply couldn't believe that he would be able to obtain such a priceless treasure one day. He felt like he was being enveloped by a huge sense of happiness. Just as the young man clenched the hilt and began to wield the 2 weapons, Bortia ran back excitedly while dragging a black metal breastplate. Her eyes were filled with excitement and anticipation as she shouted, "Quick! Let's see what kind of incredible power this thing has." "All right, move aside. I don't want to cause any accidental injuries." Andre put on his Arcana apprentice gloves and carefully placed the breastplate under his feet. Then he took out an appraisal scroll from the scroll box he carried with him and activated it without hesitation. After all, it was a cursed item. He didn't dare to risk using his mana to touch it. It would be troublesome if he accidentally touched the cursed item. As a soft white light flashed, a large amount of information quickly appeared. Berserk Devil's Armor, breastplate, +3. This armor was forged from the skull of a berserker demon and a small amount of rare alloy. It can devour all flesh and blood in battle and restore the wearer's life force. At the same time, it can greatly increase the strength attribute. Strength +3. However, as the armor itself is affected by the Berserk Devil's soul, anyone who wears it will hear a voice echoing in their mind. The longer they wear it, the easier it is for their alignment to deviate towards chaotic evil. Note, this is a cursed item. Once worn, it can never be taken off unless a curse removal spell is used. Bortia was shocked when she saw the blood-red magical light flashing on the scratched black metal breastplate. Then, she immediately asked, "How is it? Did you identify anything?" Andre took a deep breath and nodded lightly. "I identified it. Berserk Devil's Armor. Level 3 Enchanted Heavy Armor. It has the special effect of devouring flesh and blood to restore the wearer's stamina and life force. It can also greatly increase the strength attribute. For a warrior, it's an irresistible temptation. No wonder Sam chose to wear it. Of course, the curse is also troublesome. The wearer will be affected by the devil and become more and more evil and crazy. Unless a spellcaster helps, the wearer will never be able to take it off. Increase strength? Restore life force? Heavens! If it weren't for the fact that I'm so small and a thief, I'd definitely be eager to wear it right now. Although Bortia had seen many rare treasures, she couldn't help but stand up and exclaim loudly after hearing the specific attributes of the armor. For a melee profession, the most important things were reflected in the Berserk Devil's Armor. Devouring flesh and blood could provide the wearer with an endless supply of stamina and recover from injuries. The +3 strength attribute allowed the wearer to easily crush opponents of the same level. If it wasn't limited by the material itself, the enchantment level of this sword breastplate would definitely be worthy of the word legendary. That's right, it is indeed priceless. It seems that among all the spoils of war, it may be the most valuable. However, the price to pay is also very high. No matter whether the wearer's previous alignment is good or not, as long as they wear it, they will fall into the abyss of chaotic evil. Sooner or later, they will become exactly like the devil. After saying that, Andre rubbed the space between his eyebrows in a dilemma. He didn't know what to do with this armor. As a person who advocated rationality, he would never allow his own people to wear the Berserk Devil's armor. This thing was simply a double-edged sword. Not only could it pose a great threat to the enemy, but it was also a threat to his own people. Currently, there were only two choices. The first was to throw it into the furnace and recast it. The advantage of doing so was to remove the curse, but at the same time, it would also greatly weaken the various attributes. The second was to bring it back and sell at the auction house for a good price, or exchange it for some other magical items. Anyway, this world was so big. Many people were chaotic and evil. They didn't care whether they would become more perverted in the future. After seeing the Berserk Devil's armor, they would definitely go crazy with joy. Portia saw Andre's distress and winked playfully. Hee, what are you going to do with it? I don't know. Let's bring it back first. Do me a favor and cut off Uhtred's head. Then, inform everyone that we will return in 5 minutes. After saying that, Andre casually pulled a cloak from the corpse beside him, wrapped the breastplate tightly, and threw it aside. Chapter 641. A scholar once said that danger always coexisted with opportunity. The greater the risk one dared to take, the greater the reward would be. After a series of intense and exciting battles and calculations, Andre finally reaped the rewards. Not to mention the huge benefits brought by the complete control of the Shadow Net. Just the magic items obtained from Sam and Uhtred were enough to make countless people crazy, especially the seemingly inconspicuous cursed breastplate at the end. Once the news spread out, it would immediately lead to a bloody storm. The Oleal continent was not a society ruled by law. What mattered here was who had the biggest fist and whose word was law. Bold adventurers and mercenaries, as long as they had the confidence, would even dare to rob noble lords. Some of the more powerful ones would even dare to declare themselves kings. In the more chaotic western coastal areas, there were many kings of small countries that had come to be like this. Wealth, power, reputation, treasures, rights, beauties, all of these were the root causes of killing and disputes. They were the embodiment of the inner desires and the goal that countless mortals pursued in their lives. In order to avoid unnecessary trouble, Andre quickly issued a gag order, forbidding Portia from talking about the secret of the frenzied devil's armor with anyone. After all, this magic equipment was infinitely close to a legendary item. He did not want to use this thing to test whether the other members of the team could resist the temptation. In the end, Mabel received 2 magic greatswords. Portia chose the night vision belt, and Fiona was assigned the crystal pendant with +2 constitution. As for the rest of the force wall magic ring, scroll box, magic potion, and so on, they were all taken by Andre. The loot distribution meeting ended in a very short time. Except for the 2 parties, no one knew how rare and precious the worn-out armor wrapped in a cloak was. After a simple burial ceremony for the unknown female corpse, everyone began to quickly fill the soil. It only took a few minutes to bury her in the pit near the entrance of the cave. The liar Jesse used a stone to make a tombstone. During the whole process, the big cat did not leave. When everything was over, it could not help but let out a sad cry again. Poor thing. What are you going to do with it? Fiona asked softly while stroking the fur on the back of the Black Panther. Andre sighed and shook his head helplessly. I don't know. It's a leopard with high intelligence. You could try to communicate with it. If it has nowhere to go, we can take it back temporarily. Are you sure? It was an adult Black Panther. It could climb trees, swim, and run twice as fast as a human. It could jump 3 meters high and 6 meters away. Moreover, this kind of animal is a loner and can tear a person's throat with one bite. I don't think it's a good idea to let it stay in the city, Portia retorted, rolling her eyes. But we can't just leave him like this, can we? There aren't any large herbivores around Valen City for it to hunt. If we don't help, it'll either starve to death or it'll sneak into the city and be killed by the pirates. In the end, it'll become an expensive pelt under some important person's butt. Mabel's tone and eyes were filled with pity. She, who had a kind and gentle personality, could not bear to leave the Black Panther to fend for itself. Damn it, I don't care about the life or death of this big cat, let alone whether it can hurt people. I just want to know when we're going back to the city. I'm tired and hungry right now and urgently need to eat a big meal and then have a good sleep. Jess threw away the axe in his hand and complained loudly with gritted teeth. Due to his exhaustion and hunger, his temper was particularly irritable. Add to that the fact that even the slightest movement would affect his wounds, and that kind of painful and itchy feeling was worse than death. It was already not easy for him to last until he buried the female corpse. Andre ignored Jess, who was throwing a tantrum, and walked in front of the Black Panther. He stared into its pale yellow eyes filled with sorrow and asked, "I know you can understand the common language. Now tell me, do you want to live alone in the wild, or do you want to return to the city with us?" Roar! Roar! The Black Panther reluctantly glanced back at its female owner's tombstone and let out a low growl. It then stood up and followed behind the group. Without a doubt, it chose to go to the city where humans lived instead of hunting alone in the wild like a real beast. Perhaps it was because it was raised by humans from a young age, or perhaps it couldn't stand loneliness. But any wild animal that had been domesticated by humans usually had a hard time returning to nature. This was because they were too smart compared to their own kind and were often treated as a different species. Even if they were left in the wild, it would be hard for them to be accepted. Andre could understand the big cat's thoughts. He patted its head lightly and then spread his hands towards the others. It seems that the answer is out. It will return to Valen City with us. Oh, no. You'll regret this sooner or later. Portia slapped her forehead and let out a miserable cry. I think it's pretty good. At least with it guarding me when I sleep, the enemy will never be able to sneak up on me. Fiona smiled and raised her hands high, welcoming the addition of the panther. Seeing that the last problem was finally solved, Andre took a deep breath and announced loudly, "All right, bring everything you need. We're going back now. Remember, try not to attract anyone's attention along the way. I don't want to get into a conflict with anyone halfway." Huh. Believe me, this isn't up to you, especially since we're bringing a rare Black Panther. You should know that its fur is worth at least 500 gold coins. This price is enough to make many hooligans and hoodlums risk their lives for it. Portia reminded with a cold smile. "All right, then let's change the way I say it. Be quick when you act, and try not to leave anyone alive." Andre immediately changed the order. He was well aware of how frightening the desires of humans were. In order to ensure that they wouldn't be harassed endlessly in the future, he chose to silence them without hesitation. "No problem. Leave it all to me." Mabel, who had just obtained 2 magic greatswords, was eager to try them out. From his excited expression, it could be seen that he couldn't wait to try out his new weapons. Following the small forest path, the group quickly passed through the dense shrubbery and entered the city from a secluded alley. Just as the halfling had expected, they encountered many people who were eyeing the Black Panther's fur along the way. However, before the other party could make a move, the overly excited Mabel dashed out, brandishing her magic greatsword and turning the invaders into corpses in a matter of seconds. Ordinary leather armor was not able to provide any protection against magical weapons. The group did not expend much effort to return to the old warehouse. Chapter 642. It was so satisfying just now. With these 2 weapons in my hands, I feel like I'm invincible. As soon as she crossed the threshold of the warehouse, Mabel could no longer contain the joy in her heart as she shouted excitedly. However, it was no wonder. He had just killed at least 7 punks by himself. For a rookie, this was already an amazing achievement. Bosha glanced at the young man's flushed face and sneered, "Idiot, don't be too proud. Those idiots that you killed didn't even have a profession level. Killing them was not much more difficult than killing a chicken. There's nothing to be proud of. Not to mention, You're using a magical weapon. Any adult can do the same. Quickly calm down and don't indulge in the illusion. Otherwise, you'll be the one who dies when you encounter a real master. Well, I just want to get a little encouragement and recognition. Thank you for pouring cold water on me in time. Mabel, who was hit, instantly became like a wilted eggplant. She muttered to herself dejectedly as she unbuckled the buckle on her body and began to take off her armor. Not only her, but the first thing Fiona did when she entered the door was to take off her helmet and sit on the chair to remove the heavy armor. Although Andre did not use the traditional composite design during the manufacturing process, but thickened the protection on the key parts, so it was much lighter than the traditional half-body armor. Even so, it was still a big burden to wear. As soon as they returned to a safe place, the two of them could not wait to reduce the burden on themselves. As soon as the liar Jace entered the door, he went straight to the table where the leftovers were placed and stuffed the food into his mouth without saying a word. He was obviously starving. He could not care less about the pungent smell of the fish after it turned cold. In the blink of an eye, he finished the fish clean. The Black Panther simply patrolled around the warehouse and then came to an inconspicuous corner to yawn. Not long after, it lay on the ground and fell asleep. Seeing that everyone was busy with their own things, Andre carried the two bloody heads and walked into the quiet basement. As soon as he passed through the dim staircase, he saw Mia, who was in her cat-human form, curled up at the top of the stairs. Her eyes were filled with nervousness and fear. Not far from her was Little Eye, who was floating in midair. The two of them had completely sealed off the entrance to the basement. If a stranger were to barge in, they would immediately suffer a double blow. What a good girl. Guess, what gift did I bring back for you? Andre shook his head, wrapped in the rag, and asked. Mia instantly noticed the blood-soaked cloth, and she shuddered subconsciously. Don't bring it over. I don't need anything. No, don't be in a hurry to reject it. Open it and take a look. Believe me, it won't let you down. With that, Andre threw the head on the ground and made an inviting gesture. He was very clear that there were many personal grudges between Mia and Uhtred. He was even more clear that if there was someone in this world who wanted the latter's life the most, it would definitely be the former. With Andre's encouragement, Mia unraveled the rag with trembling hands and soon revealed the old human head hidden inside. Shocking. Unconcealable shock. She raised her head slightly, her face full of disbelief. Even her breathing became hurried. After a full minute, she asked with a trembling voice, How is this possible? He's actually dead. Who? Who killed him? It's me. I killed him because his plan to use the succubus to destroy the stability and unity of the internal organization was exposed. Do you still remember that woman called Carmen? She is the demon that Uhtred summoned. Just a few hours ago, David also died. Now, there are only 5 feet left in this area. Andre calmly sat down on a chair, poured himself a glass of water, and then patiently answered. His tone was very calm, as if killing Uhtred was a trivial matter that was not worth making a fuss about. Dead? They're all dead? Ha 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 ha. It's good that they're dead. It's great that they're dead. Old man, you always thought that you could control everything. You never thought that you would have such a day. Ha ha. Mia suddenly laughed like a lunatic, and hysterical curses came out of her mouth. From her performance, it could be seen that the hatred between the two was very deep, and it had already reached the point where they would not rest until one of them was dead. Andre did not interrupt her venting, nor did he urge her. He just silently drank the water in the glass. He had always been very patient and did not mind waiting for a few more minutes. Who knew if it was because she had been suppressed for too long? But Mia began to use her sharp claws as she cursed and scratched Uhtred's face. Not long after, Uhtred's entire head became a bloody mess. An ordinary person would have nightmares at night just by looking at it. As the scene became more and more restricted, Andre immediately frowned and shouted, Enough! Stop it! There's no meaning in taking revenge on a dead person's head. It can't feel pain or despair. You're hurting yourself now. If you don't want to die, stop immediately. Enough? No, not enough. It's still not enough. You don't know what he did to me. I originally had the chance to live a normal life. But this cold-blooded scoundrel ruined my life. He ruined everything for me. Fury made Mia temporarily forget her fear. She let out a heart-wrenching roar at Andre. The expression on her face was abnormally sinister, giving people the illusion that she would pounce on him and bite him at any time. Quiet. No matter what he did to you, those things have already passed. Instead of continuing to be entangled in the past, it's better to think about the future. You're only in your 20s this year. You're still very young and have a limitless future. From the agitated eyes of the girl in front of him, Andre could easily determine what had happened back then. It was nothing more than Uhtred personally destroying some of the things that Mia cherished in order to cultivate her into an excellent tool. From then on, an irreconcilable hatred was planted between the two of them. But so what? In Oreir, the weak didn't have the right to speak, let alone the right to resist the fates set by the strong. They were chess pieces, the most pitiful cannon fodder. If they wanted to break free from control, there was only one way, and that was to become stronger, stronger, and stronger. Under Andre's reprimand, Mia gradually calmed down her agitated emotions. She wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes while kneeling on the ground with one hand on her chest and said, "Thank you. Thank you for everything you've done, and thank you for your advice. I owe you a huge favor. If you need anything in the future, please don't hesitate to ask." Chapter 643. Everything I've done for you? Ha! Staring at the feline girl's beast-like vertical pupils, Andre shook his head with a chuckle. "No, I think you've misunderstood something. You killed Uhtred only because he violated my bottom line and attempted to surpass my control over the resources of the Shadow Web in the Sardinia Islands. As for the grudges between you and him, that's your own business." I brought his head back just to remind you that no matter what you do in the future, it's best to put away your previous tricks. Although I don't like to use brutality and coldness to establish my authority, if someone provokes me again and again, then I don't mind using some extreme methods. Understood. You're different from Uhtred. He likes to control everything, even the thoughts of others. You, on the other hand, prefer to draw a red line and let everyone know which areas cannot be crossed. Then, you let your subordinates do whatever they want. I like your way of doing things. At least I can feel a bit of freedom. Mia was very smart and pointed out the most fundamental difference between the two of them. Uhtred was a very traditional mage who advocated the theory of absolute control that had been passed down since ancient times. In other words, ordinary people didn't need to think independently. They only needed to follow the orders of smart people 100%. This was a good thing for everyone. As for the scope of smart people, it had been decided thousands of years ago. There was no profession in the world that was smarter than mages, so obeying smart people was also obeying mages. Although it sounded very reasonable and theoretically possible, it ignored the most important point, which was human nature. No one was willing to admit that they were stupid, and no one was willing to lose their freedom and live under the control of others for the rest of their lives. One day, 2 days, a month, or even a year, as the time of being controlled grew longer, humans who had independent thoughts would have a very strange reaction, and that was a sense of oppression. They would feel that there was an invisible thing constantly pressing down on them, getting heavier and heavier, and finally leading to the illusion that they couldn't breathe. Soon, resentment and hatred would be born, without any excuse or psychological comfort. The resentment in people's hearts would grow wildly like weeds. Perhaps under the deterrence of violence and fear, most of them could continue to remain silent. However, if violence and fear lost their effect, a strong resistance would erupt in an instant. There was no doubt that Uhtred's management style was a failure because he didn't know what it meant to hide, and he didn't know how to create an illusion of comfort in his heart. If he had used a different method, he might not have fallen to his current state. This was just like the countries on Earth. Although someone had clearly pointed out that the country was a tool of class rule a long time ago, those who could become the ruling class naturally couldn't be poor. In other words, from the beginning to the end, those who controlled the country were always few in number, but controlled most of the resources of interest groups. But what was strange was that as long as these interest groups called for the so-called democracy and used the so-called election as a cover to raise the flag that the country belonged to the people, people seemed to be able to find some kind of psychological balance all of a sudden and began to feel at ease that they could really influence the policy. In fact, the real control had always been in the hands of a small number of people. Ordinary people only received a kind of placebo. Andre deeply understood this point, so he rarely gave clear details in his style of doing things. Instead, he just pointed out the goal and things to pay attention to, and left the rest to the people who carried out the task to freely express themselves. In this way, not only could a person's talent be maximized, but it would also give the other party an illusion that they were very free. Obviously, Mia didn't understand psychology at all, and she didn't understand that there was essentially no difference between the two. She only found comfort from an emotional point of view and began to accept her new identity with a clear conscience. Heir of freedom? Ha 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 ha. Andre felt that the other party's answer was full of black humor and sarcasm, and he couldn't help but laugh out loud. After laughing for more than 10 seconds, he slowly stopped and continued. Well, since you like it, I'll give you the opportunity to express yourself as you wish. I'll give you this so-called heir of freedom. If I remember correctly, you seem to be carrying out a separatist activity against the Ratmen, right? That's right. Mia nodded with a puzzled face. She didn't understand why the other party was laughing, and she didn't understand the meaning of those eyes full of pity. Tell me about it. I'm starting to get a bit interested in this plan of yours. Andre didn't feel the obligation to explain, and directly asked the question he was most concerned about. It's very simple. I seduced old Bernie's grandson, and at the same time, enticed him to rope in a group of young and hot-blooded rat men within the guild, and incited their hatred towards the underground guilds. As long as old Bernie still persisted in his strategy of tolerance, then his tribe would soon face an unavoidable split. If he decided to start a war, then the foundation of Allen City's rule would once again be shaken. Mia spoke of her plan with a bit of pride. She was filled with a sense of accomplishment for toying with Patty in the palm of her hand. If it weren't for the accident that happened later on, she was confident that she could use this plan to obtain an even higher position. Andre raised his eyebrows in surprise. Oh, so you're the person behind Patty? That's right, it's me. What? Do you plan to restart this plan? Mia raised her head and asked carefully. Yes, I plan to restart this plan. More accurately, I want you to immediately mobilize these young rat men, filled with hatred and hot-blooded rat men. The time for the decisive battle will soon arrive, and I don't want other powers to be spectators at such a crucial time. Therefore, it's time for old Bernie to pick a side. With that, Andre's gaze deepened. In reality, he was more afraid of the Rat King's destructive power than the slow reaction of the underground guilds. Therefore, he had to drag the Rat King down with him no matter what. Mia instantly became excited when she heard the plan to restart. Weapons. Master, I need many weapons. There's a cave 5 kilometers outside the city. Everything you need is in there. Go now, and help me unveil the prologue of this show. If your performance is satisfactory, then I don't mind giving you a few more scenes. Andre raised the cat girl's chin with his right hand as he spoke, his finger gently sliding between her sexy collarbone and cleavage. As you wish, my beloved master. Not only did Mia not have any expression of disgust, she even squinted her eyes in enjoyment, like a cat being caressed by its master. She then kissed the back of his hand and quickly disappeared. Chapter 644. After sending off the sexy cat girl, Andre closed the door to the basement and asked Small Eyes to guard outside to prevent anyone from entering. After finishing all the preparations, he quickly went to the innermost corner and stared at the woman who was trembling in fear on the bed. After a full minute, he sighed slightly. Sigh, Madam, you don't have to make the atmosphere so tense. We can sit down and have a good talk. No, there is nothing to talk about between us. Just kill me. I don't know anything. I can't say anything. If I say anything, that man won't let me go. He's a real demon. The woman who pretended to be Clarissa Bessemer was very agitated, even a little crazy. She had been in this state since she was captured. She refused to eat or drink, as if she wanted to die of thirst or starvation in order to obtain eternal relief. Andre could not imagine what a person had experienced to be so afraid. It had even surpassed fear itself and became a kind of mental shackle. Compared to this, death was an inconspicuous foil. Seeing that the woman was still unable to communicate normally, he frowned subconsciously and threw the head in his hand to the ground. He ordered in an unquestionable tone, "Open it, now." Since the problem could not be solved by communication, he would use facts to speak. Andre believed that as long as she saw the thing wrapped in the rags, the woman would be able to come out of the shadows and decipher the manuscript of the master swordsman, Johannes Richard Turner. This was also one of the reasons why he cut off Sam's head. After witnessing Sam's combat techniques with his own eyes, Andre had a deep understanding of how precious the knowledge left behind by the man who was known as the strongest warrior in human history was. Now that he had the opportunity to obtain a part of it, he would not let it go. The woman was startled by the sudden package, especially the pungent smell of blood and the dark red bloodstains. It did not look like something normal. However, she was in a state of mental breakdown at the moment. She did not care about the danger at all. Trembling, she untied the cloth wrapped outside, revealing the black head inside. In an instant, the woman jumped more than a meter in the air as if she had seen a ghost. She quickly retreated to the corner and curled into a ball. She shouted in horror, "No! Impossible! This can't be real! You must be lying to me! How could he die? Impossible! Illusion! My eyes must be hallucinating." Even though her skin was severely burned, and even her hair and eyebrows were unrecognizable, she was still able to recognize the identity of this head at a glance. She seemed to have gone crazy as she kept grabbing her hair with her hands. As she used too much strength, she even scratched her scalp, leaving streaks of blood. "Why not? Calm down, madam. I haven't said anything yet." Andre grabbed her slender wrist and stopped her from further self-harm. However, the woman didn't seem to appreciate his kindness. She pushed him away and stared at him with bloodshot eyes. She laughed wildly and roared, "Ha ha! Calm down? How am I supposed to calm down? Say it. How am I supposed to calm down? A whole 15 years. He was like an omnipotent god, occupying my head for 15 whole years. Do you know how I spent the past 15 years? I forced myself to wag my tail and beg like a loyal dog to win the favor of the executioner who murdered my family. Now tell me, is he really dead? Is it true?" As her tone became more and more agitated, the woman's expression became more and more ferocious. At the same time, her two hands grabbed Andre's collar and shook vigorously. Her whole body was releasing an aura of unrelenting determination. "I'll say it again. Calm down, madam. Although your experience is very pitiful, I don't have any obligation to answer your question, do I? Everything in this world has to follow a basic principle, and that is to give and receive. If you want to get something, then you have to pay the corresponding price. I can answer your question, but before that, have you thought about what you are prepared to pay?" Andre's tone was as calm as ever, as if he didn't care about her rude attitude at all. It was as if he was just stating a fact. But in fact, from the moment the woman lost control of her emotions, he had already begun to laugh in his heart. This was because he knew that Sam's brain was still useful. The more agitated the woman was, the higher the possibility of achieving her goal. "Oomph. Price? No problem. As long as you tell me what happened, I'm willing to pay everything. My body, my soul, even the knowledge in my head. You can take all of it away whenever you want." The flood of emotions caused the woman to completely lose her mind. She loudly promised everything she had left, without considering the consequences. Perhaps to her, today was the end of her life. Seeing that things had developed to this point, Andre didn't intend to beat around the bush. He directly took out the manuscript that he carried with him and threw it on the bed. "I don't ask for much. Help me decipher the contents inside. I believe that since you can impersonate Larissa Bessemer, you must have inherited her ability. It shouldn't be difficult to do this, right?" The woman didn't say anything. She immediately picked up the manuscript and flipped through a few pages. Soon, a sarcastic smile appeared on her face. Yes, I can decipher it. Someone has patiently waited for more than 10 years to find this manuscript. I didn't expect it to be in your hands. In fact, my existence itself is to decipher it, so of course I can do it. In this world, there's no second person who can do it better than me. Is that so? I'm relieved to hear that. Andre nodded with satisfaction. That's right. Sam is dead. I chopped off his head with my own hands. Even his beloved armor and weapon have become my spoils of war. If you don't believe me, you can see for yourself. After receiving a positive answer, the woman's hands began to tremble uncontrollably. Tears kept falling from her eyes. Her lips and face became abnormally pale. Her nose twitched slightly. Not long after, she knelt on the ground and burst into tears. She cried so sadly that it seemed as if she wanted to release the grievances and resentment that had been suppressed for years in one breath. At the same time, she kicked and kicked Sam's head. Andre stood at the side and watched. He didn't stop her or say anything. He just silently waited for her to fulfill her promise after she had vented enough. If the situation allowed, he also wanted to hear what happened behind the scenes. He believed that it must be a very shocking and bizarre story. Chapter 645. The atmosphere in the basement was oppressive and oppressive. The only light came from the oil lamp on the table in the middle. It was so dim that it couldn't light up a space of more than 100 square meters. Coupled with the badly mutilated head, it added a bit of a terrifying atmosphere. After an unknown amount of time, the woman finally stopped sobbing. She sat on the ground with an expressionless face. Her eyes were lifeless and empty, like a body without a soul. If it weren't for her hands pressing on Sam's head, perhaps anyone would have mistaken her for a dead body. Of course, her current state wasn't much better than death. Although she was still alive physically, her heart was already dead. The immense pain had completely destroyed the woman's desire to live and her vision for the future. A person who didn't desire to live and didn't have any self-worth to fulfill usually wouldn't live for too long. In his previous life, Andre had seen such eyes in the hospital. He also knew that not long after that accidental encounter, that person used a fruit knife to end her life. Without a doubt, if he didn't want to see this woman suddenly kill herself, he had to quickly set a new life goal for her. Otherwise, when half of the manuscript was deciphered and she was gone, that would be a joke. Cough. If you don't mind, can you tell me what happened to you? I'm a bit curious. What was your original name? How old are you now? How did Sam turn you into a replica of Clarissa Bessemer? In order to prevent this woman from continuing to be depressed, Andre deliberately pretended to be harmless. He walked 2 steps forward with a smile, sat down beside her, and started to lead the conversation. As a capable actor, he could change his image and temperament at any time. In just a few seconds, he changed from a plain and cold mage to a gentle and considerate gentleman. Especially his gentle and intimate actions, it was simply a fatal poison to the opposite sex. The woman whose cheeks were touched by his fingers obviously twitched her arm. She slowly turned her head and asked with a voice full of bitterness, "Do you really want to know? I have to remind you, this story is full of blood and killing, and also indescribable morbidity. Perhaps after listening to it, you will have nightmares for the rest of your life." Yes, I want to know, and I can guarantee that I won't have nightmares, because I've already encountered nightmares in real life. How about this? You tell your story first, and then I'll tell mine. When the conversation is over, maybe we can even become friends. What do you think? After saying that, Andre looked into the other party's red eyes, his gaze full of sincerity. The woman hesitated for a few seconds, then took a deep breath and said, "Well, since you're willing to listen, I don't mind telling you my experience. Sam is dead anyway, so I have nothing to hide. My real name is Jennifer Holden, and I originally had a kind and amiable father and a gentle and beautiful mother. They were both nobles of Chodel City and lived a happy life. However, all of this was completely destroyed on a night in March 15th years ago. I only vaguely remember that night. A group of masked thugs suddenly rushed into a manor in the suburbs. They killed everyone they saw, from the maids to the gardeners. They didn't even spare the babies who were less than 5 months old. Screams, blood, and corpses turned the beautiful manor into a purgatory. My father and mother were beheaded right in front of me. I was only 12 years old that year, the most beautiful age of a young girl, but I had already lost everything. After killing everything that was alive, these masked thugs set a fire and brought me to Sam. From that day onwards, he became my master, using unparalleled fear to control my soul. I was forced to wear an ice-cold iron mask, wear armor that restricted the growth of my body and bones, and even my diet was strictly controlled. All of these were just to let me perfectly replicate a certain person's appearance and body. Sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? But what's even more ridiculous is yet to come. 2 years later, through special means, they sent me to the side of a woman named Clarissa Bessemer. I began to follow her every move and learn the knowledge in her head. If I didn't meet the requirements in the slightest, I would immediately receive an extremely terrifying punishment. Can you imagine the pain of having your internal organs pierced by steel needles? Have you ever tasted the feeling of having your nose stuffed with cocklebur, a soybean-sized, oval-shaped plant full of sharp thorns? These were only the appetizers of all the punishments. I simply didn't know how I endured it. Thanks to them, I used less than 6 years to learn the ancient elven language, dragon language, goblin language, beastman language, abyss language, purgatory language, heavenly language, and more than a dozen languages and characters. Especially in the field of code breaking, I had long surpassed Clarissa Bessemer. Right after I finished learning the last language, Sam appeared once again. He coldly instructed, "From now on, I am Clarissa Bessemer." Then, he brought the pitiful woman to the next room. Not long after, heart-wrenching screams and wails could be heard. Half an hour later, I secretly went to take a look and found that the real Clarissa Bessemer had become a naked corpse. The twin peaks that she was so proud of were gone. To be exact, they were torn apart and eaten by someone with his teeth. There were bite marks all over her body. From then on, I learned that Sam had a fetish for eating people, especially young and beautiful women. He liked to rape them while swallowing fresh, bloody meat. That's right, I was afraid. I was afraid that I would end up like him one day. So, I tried my best to show that I was useful. Fortunately, I was still useful. At the very least, before deciphering this manuscript, he didn't intend to touch me. As for what happened afterwards, I believe that you can easily deduce it with your intelligence, right? I completely replaced Clarissa Bessemer and hid in Valence City as her, silently waiting for the manuscript to appear. Although I was still on tenterhooks, at least I had a few days of comfort. As more and more stories were told, the woman named Jennifer Holden gradually fell into a trance, as if she was attracted by some kind of power and could not wait to share the sufferings that she had suffered with others. Every time she told a part of the story, her lifeless eyes would brighten up a little bit. In the end, they even recovered a little bit of vitality. Chapter 646. Someone once said that if you share happiness with others, your happiness will be doubled, and if you share pain with others, your pain will be halved. Although Andre was skeptical about the authenticity of this sentence, it seemed to make sense after seeing the reaction of the woman beside him. However, as a person who valued privacy and kept secrets, he never liked to share his emotions with anyone, let alone let others see his weak side. When he was happy, he would look up at the starry sky alone and enjoy a sumptuous meal. When he was in pain, he would silently save this pain and wait for an opportunity to return it to the person who made him feel pain. Because Andre always believed that loneliness was a good medicine that could make people persevering and tenacious, help people get rid of their dependence on the outside world, make people become great, and finally embark on the road to success. However, he also understood that humans were creatures that couldn't live alone without a group. Everyone had to integrate into the group so that they wouldn't be ostracized and treated as a different species. Therefore, when necessary, he was willing to share some insignificant things with others. After listening to Jennifer Holding's story, Andre didn't immediately make any comments. He just nodded gently and sighed. Your life is full of hardships and pain, but this doesn't mean that you have to give up hope for the future and actively embrace death. Of course, your life belongs to you, and you have the right to decide when to end everything. But before that, I hope you can listen to my story. Please tell me. I loved listening to stories when I was young. I didn't expect that after 15 years, someone would be willing to tell me a story. Jennifer said with a trace of joy that only a little girl would have. Her face was full of an innocent expression, as if she had returned to her beautiful childhood. There was no doubt that her current mental state was very unstable, especially the rapid deterioration of her mental age. It was almost visible to the naked eye. Perhaps it was a way to escape and protect herself, or perhaps it was an instinctive desire to forget the most painful part of her life. In short, she began to selectively filter some of her memories. Andre knew very well that the current situation was very bad, but there was nothing he could do. Psychological trauma was the most difficult of all diseases to treat, not to mention a dabbler like him. Even a real psychiatrist could not guarantee a full recovery. Most of the time, it depended on the strength of the individual's will. Obviously, Jennifer wasn't the kind of person with a strong will. She just had a strong tolerance. Once the external pressure disappeared, she immediately revealed her most vulnerable side. Sighing to himself, Andre began to speak unhurriedly about the dangers and setbacks he had encountered after coming to this world. Jennifer could not help but feel a strong sense of immersion when she had to face the powerful and terrifying necromancer. She even felt that their experiences were surprisingly similar. The only difference was that Andre chose to fight back, while she chose to endure the humiliation. While listening to the story with fascination, Jennifer silently wondered if she would be able to accomplish these near-impossible miracles if she were in his shoes. Time slowly passed without her noticing. Under Andre's deliberate guidance, the atmosphere began to quietly change from negative grief to positive inspiration. He deliberately hid the original dark and cruel side, and only talked about the part where justice triumphed over evil in an attempt to reignite the hope for the future. In fact, the effect was not bad. Jennifer, whose mental age had dropped to the level of a young girl, quickly shifted her attention away from herself. Her eyes widened as she exclaimed in shock. So you're saying that you're able to become a mage with just a beginner's book? Oh my God, that's unbelievable. As far as I know, to become a mage, one has to go through a long period of apprenticeship and the guidance of a mentor. Otherwise, the slightest mistake will lead to death. But you have broken this common sense? Indeed, normally, a mage's apprenticeship would take at least a few years. During that time, not only do they have to learn a lot of basic theories, but they also have to complete their understanding of the universe. My unexpected success is not so much talent, but luck. You have to know that I was really forced into a corner at that time, so I could only take a risk. You have to understand that many people and things in this world are forced. It's like in a critical moment, you have to make some difficult choices. You can't escape, you have to face them bravely, and these choices often affect your life. After saying that, Andre raised his hand and snapped his fingers. Instantly, a 7-colored rainbow appeared out of thin air above their heads, illuminating the dim basement, and at the same time bringing a sense of relief. He stood up and stood right under the rainbow, smiling as he spread out his hands. Look, this is the choice I made. The almost omnipotent arcane power is very beautiful and spectacular, isn't it? Looking at the beautiful scenery emitting a dazzling halo, Jennifer's face showed an unconcealable infatuation, and she nodded lightly. Yes, it is indeed very beautiful, and at the same time very powerful. You have controlled your own destiny with courage and wisdom, but I am a pitiful creature toyed with by fate. Thank you. Thank you for your wonderful story. Don't worry, I won't commit suicide, at least not before I fulfill my promise. No, you're wrong. Fate never plays tricks on anyone. In fact, you just have to pull yourself together and set a goal for yourself. I believe that it won't be long before you have the same power as me." After saying that, Andre opened his arms, and white electric arcs burst out from his fingertips, making crackling sounds. He could feel that the woman in front of him had developed an extremely strong interest in magic. As long as he put in a little more effort, he could pull her out of the abyss of pain. "You mean, I can also become a mage?" Jennifer raised her eyebrows and asked somewhat uncertainly. "That's right. Think about it. You only used 6 years to learn more than 10 unfamiliar languages. In terms of intelligence, you definitely surpass ordinary people, and the only restriction to becoming a mage is to be smart enough. Since you have achieved this, why can't you?" Andre asked very seriously. Hearing these words, Jennifer suddenly felt as if her heart had been hit by some kind of force, and her movements and expression immediately became stiff. After a full minute, she shook her head with a bitter smile. "Maybe you're right. I have the talent to become a mage, but I have missed the best age to learn. I guess no official mage would be willing to accept an old apprentice like me." Chapter 647. Looking at the pair of eyes filled with disappointment, Andre suddenly smiled. Wasn't this the reason why he had been so busy all day? A scholar once said that desire was the driving force that drove humans to live. As long as there was desire, a person would not be willing to embrace death. It was clear that Jennifer was no longer the disheartened, soulless zombie from before. She was deeply attracted by the beautiful magic and had a strong urge to obtain this power. "No, you're wrong again. Although it's better to learn magic as young as possible, it doesn't mean that there won't be a chance when you're older. You have to know that in history, many famous mages only started to learn arcane magic at the age of 30 or even 40, but they used a few short years to achieve something that others would never be able to achieve in their lifetime. In my opinion, age has never been an obstacle to becoming a mage. As long as you nod your head, I can immediately become your guide on the path of magic. Now tell me, do you desire to become a mage? Do you desire to possess powerful and beautiful power? Do you desire to control your own destiny and no longer be at the mercy of others?" Andre used a provocative tone and asked 3 questions that were directly from the depths of her heart. He was very clear about what it meant for a normal person to step into the world of mages. It meant that they would have to learn endless knowledge and explore the endless universe. From then on, they would have no time to hesitate, to be lost, and to remember the pain of the past. Compared to the ultimate goal of mages, which was to uncover the veil of eternal truth, a miserable life was nothing. Jennifer would soon abandon the past and spend all her energy on learning and exploration. From a certain perspective, the world of magic was completely like a mental drug. It made people unable to help but immerse themselves in it, forgetting to eat, to drink, to sleep, to forget the passage of time, and even to forget about their own death. Anyone who had personally experienced the feeling of this wonderful power flowing through their blood would instantly become addicted. As an addict, Andre had no doubt experienced this deeply. I, can I really do it? You're really willing to be my mentor?" Perhaps it was because of her emotional state, Jennifer's voice was trembling and stuttering. Her 2 hands were tightly clasped together, and because she used too much strength, her knuckles were pale. "Of course, you have outstanding talent. There's no doubt about that. I'm also very happy to become your mentor and help you embark on your own path of magic. However, knowledge is expensive, and I can't always provide you with everything you need for free." It was not easy to bring someone who knew nothing about Arcana into the school. Not only did it require a lot of effort, but it also required the purchase of many strange tools and expensive materials. If converted into gold coins, it would be equivalent to the savings of a wealthy noble who did not eat or drink for 3 years. One had to know that this was only the cost of calling when he was still an apprentice. After becoming an official mage, with every increase in level, his ability to squander would increase exponentially. Mages were never a class that the poor could afford to play. With Andre's current income, it wouldn't be a problem for him to nurture a dozen apprentices out of his own pocket. However, He didn't want to be in a situation where he was indebted to one who was indebted to another. Therefore, there were some things that needed to be made clear. Jennifer was very smart. She immediately understood the subtext of his words. She smiled sweetly and said confidently, "I understand. Most mages follow the basic principle of exchange. If you want to get something, you have to pay a corresponding price. Right now, I can't pay much, only the knowledge in my head. I can be your assistant and servant. If that's not enough, then I'll have to pay with my body. I have no experience in this area, so you'd better not expect too much." It had to be said that she seemed to have an unimaginable obsession with magic and was willing to give up everything for it. Andre sensed an indescribable quality from the young man. It was this quality that made him hesitate for a few seconds, but he quickly recovered and extended his right hand with a smile. "Your knowledge is very useful to me. It should be enough to cover part of the cost. As for the rest, I can lend it to you in the form of a loan. When you have the ability to repay it, you can pay it back bit by bit. Now let's shake hands. From now on, you're my apprentice." "Thank you for your generosity, my dear teacher. Rather than shaking hands, I prefer a warm hug. You don't mind, do you?" Jennifer said as she opened her arms. Her eyes were filled with excitement and anticipation. "Of course I don't mind. Who would refuse a hug from a beautiful lady?" Andre retracted his right hand and took 2 steps forward. Following that, 2 women's arms hugged his neck tightly. The 2 of them were face to face. The distance between their noses was less than a centimeter. They could feel each other's breathing. Jennifer maintained her figure very well. Perhaps it was because she had been controlling her diet for a long time. Her waist did not have a trace of fat. In addition, she was 27 years old. Her whole body was filled with the mature charm of a woman. On the other hand, Andre was a handsome young man. The experience of 2 lifetimes gave him a maturity and vicissitudes that did not match his age, especially the wisdom in his eyes. Anyone who saw them would have the illusion that they were seen through from the inside out. Some geneticists once said that outstanding members of the opposite sex would be attracted to each other. This was because their bodies contained genes that could produce more outstanding offspring. This kind of attraction was fatal. It was almost impossible for healthy people to resist. Andre did not know whether the geneticist's theory was correct or not. However, he knew that due to his long-term abstinence, some of the desires in his body were rising rapidly. Of course, Jennifer felt the same way. Ever since she was abducted at the age of 12, she had been living in fear. She did not even dare to comfort herself, let alone find a man. She was still a virgin to this day. Now that all the pressure was gone, her primitive instincts naturally began to awaken. Huff, 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 huff. With the secretion of hormones, their breathing gradually became heavier. In just a few minutes, their clothes were soaked in sweat. Their last trace of rationality was hovering on the verge of collapse. Chapter 648. Just when the man and woman were half undressed and about to go all out, there was a sudden rush of knocking at the entrance of the basement, followed by Mabel's voice through the cover. "Hey, buddy, no matter what you're doing, you better come out immediately." Someone just slipped an unsigned letter in through the crack of the door. There's even a silver skull coin in the letter. I think it's probably something important. Andre, whose blood was boiling, immediately calmed down after hearing this. He hurriedly took a deep breath and replied loudly, "Okay, wait a moment. I'll go up right away. You have to be quick, or else I can't guarantee that Portia won't open the wax seal on the letter before you come up. You know, she's always very curious, and now she's eyeing the letter in my hand like a tiger eyeing its prey." After making a joke, Mabel's voice quickly disappeared. She didn't try to get past the small-eyed guard and enter the basement. In fact, without the master's order, no one could open the cover to the basement under his nose. If anyone dared to force their way in, they would immediately be shot with a frost ray. "Looks like our intimate plans are going to be ruined, right?" Jennifer licked her lips and asked with her 2 watery eyes. With reason once again taking control of his brain, Andre quickly recovered his calm appearance and shook his head with a chuckle. "No, my dear apprentice, We didn't have any plans from the start. What we did just now was just a strong physiological impulse. Just like how animals go into heat during certain seasons, humans are a little more special and stay in heat for an entire year. That sounds interesting. Is this the first lesson you're going to give me, mentor? Jennifer raised her eyebrows and asked. Obviously, she liked this kind of conversation filled with ridicule, and she liked the freedom she had now, where she didn't have to suppress her natural instincts. If you think so, then so be it. Erudition is the result of the accumulation of knowledge. Becoming a mage just so happens to require a lot of knowledge. As long as you continue on the path of magic, you'll become erudition one day. All right, now let go of me. I need to go up and see what's going on. As Andre spoke, he quickly tidied up his messy clothes. Although it was a wonderful pleasure to be hugged by a sexy and beautiful woman, he didn't want to delay his business. As the saying went, only men who could control their lower bodies at critical moments were qualified to achieve extraordinary achievements. Those who were dominated by their lower bodies could only be slaves to their desires for the rest of their lives. Jennifer stroked her sweat-soaked hair, not minding the large amount of exposed skin on her chest. Reluctantly, she loosened her arms. Well, as you wish, my young mentor. I have to say, your self-control is quite astonishing. May I ask, are you always able to control your desires? Andre shrugged innocently and replied, Unfortunately, I can't. There were times when I lost control of my emotions or desires, but such situations were extremely rare. Most of the time, my will was always under the control of reason. In fact, desire originates from the physiological needs of the body itself. It is a primitive instinct hidden in the blood. No one can completely control their own desires, let alone mortals. Even the high and mighty gods are no exception. Primitive instinct hidden in the blood. Looking down at the reddened skin around her collarbone, Jennifer's eyes showed a trace of understanding. From the age of 12 to 27, this was the first time she had such an impulse. Previously, because she was always in a state of extreme psychological suppression, many of her instincts were forcibly wiped out. Now that it was suddenly released, she was somewhat at a loss. Yes, just like you need to eat when you're hungry, drink when you're thirsty, and sleep when you're sleepy, reproduction is a basic human need. It is usually expressed in the form of sex. You'd better adapt and control it as soon as possible. Self-control is a necessary lesson for every mage. If you can't do this, I'm afraid it won't be long before you die in all kinds of dangerous magic experiments. After saying that, Andre raised his head and left a meaningful look, then turned and walked up the stairs leading to the upper floor. He was very clear that his new apprentice would be troubled by emotional and physical aspects for a long time, especially the latter, which is like a flood bursting through a dam, constantly emitting an aura that attracted the opposite sex. Don't worry, this little trouble can't stop me. Also, that manuscript will take at most 3 days to finish. I hope you can give me a little surprise by then. Jennifer stretched and waved the notebook in her hand. I promise, once you decipher the secrets in the manuscript, I will immediately start using the fastest speed to bring you into the world of mages. Remember, I want a complete manuscript without any flaws. Don't sacrifice quality for speed. Andre warned without turning his head. Jennifer smiled and shrugged her shoulders. My dear teacher, you have to have some confidence in me. You know, I have been preparing for this day for close to 10 years. All the knowledge and skills stored in my brain are all for this little manuscript. No matter how fast I decipher it, there will not be any mistakes. Is that so? That's good. It seems that I have to prepare a small gift in advance. After saying that, Andre turned his head and smiled. He then opened the lid above his head and left the basement. Looking at his back, Jennifer rubbed her red and hot face and muttered to herself in a voice that only she could hear, Thank you. Thank you, my dear teacher. Thank you for giving me a new life. Name, Jennifer Holding, apprentice race, human, adult, age, 27 alignment, lawful neutral, willing to abide by order and law, regardless of whether the ruling class is a tyrant or not, likes to act according to established rules, regardless of the outcome. People in this alignment are usually absolutely fair judges, soldiers who perfectly obey the orders of their superiors. They're the guardians of order and are the favorite subordinates of those in power. Intimacy. 85. She is full of gratitude and admiration towards you. Attributes. Strength. 7. Unable to trust a chicken. Agility. 11. Slightly better than an ordinary person. Vitality. 8. Enduring a huge amount of pressure for a long time, coupled with malnutrition, resulting in low endurance and immunity. Intelligence. 18. Genius through and through. The limit of what a normal human can achieve. Perceptive sense. 13. Under dangerous circumstances, she has trained her senses to be relatively sharp. Charm. 14. This is an enchanting, mature woman, full of intellectual beauty. Profession. None. Health points. 4 out of 4, healthy state. Ability points. 0 attribute points. 0 inch you have obtained as second apprentice. Please nurture her into a talent. The higher the apprentice's achievements in the future, the more rewards you will receive. Chapter 649. For a mage, this can almost be called a perfect template. Looks like I've really picked up a bargain. Looking at the information that appeared in his retina, Andre, who had just walked out of the basement, couldn't help but smile, a trace of joy flashing in his eyes. He originally only wanted to help her regain hope, but who would have thought that Jennifer's talent was so outstanding, especially her intelligence, which far exceeded his expectations. No wonder Sam chose to cultivate her into a clone of Clarissa Bessemer. Perhaps it was because of her outstanding learning ability. After all, it was unlikely that a normal person would be able to master more than 10 languages in a short few years, let alone learn how to decipher complex codes. According to the statistics of some scholars, this kind of extreme talent usually only appeared in 1 in 10,000 people, and those who possessed it were destined to be extraordinary. Of course, perhaps those foolish warriors didn't fully understand what Jennifer's existence meant. They might have only seen her as a smart girl, a somewhat outstanding tool. But in Andre's eyes, Jennifer was an unpolished diamond. As long as she was nurtured a little, it wouldn't take long for her to blossom with resplendent light. Just as he was thinking about what kind of learning plan he should draw up, Mabel walked over and directly handed over a letter and a coin. Here, this is what someone just stuffed in through the crack in the door. The pattern on the coin is very strange. Portia said that it belongs to a guild called Thornbird. It seems to be an entrance ticket to some kind of gathering. Thornbird Guild? I seem to have heard of this name before. Andre took the coin and glanced at the slightly crude engraving on it. He immediately began to search for relevant memories in his mind. After a short few seconds, he suddenly recalled that not long ago, Maris seemed to have mentioned that there was a guild in Valen City that would organize a small auction every once in a while, including the ghost all potion that he had been tracking. Remembering this, he hurriedly opened the letter, only to see the light yellow parchment written on it. In 5 days, the Thornbird Guild will be holding an auction in the upper city. It is said that Necromancer Cecil is likely to attend. I thought that you would be interested in this news, so I sent someone to inform you. In addition, an admission ticket was sent along with the letter. The person holding the coin could bring along 2 attendants. One last reminder, if you really want to buy something, it's best to bring enough cash, because the Bramblebird Guild's auction never accepts money orders. Never betray your friends. Although there was no signature at the back of the letter, Andre recognized Maris's handwriting at a glance. She was the only one who was secretly investigating this matter. He didn't expect to find a clue so quickly. Hey, hurry up and tell me what's inside. Is it that little bitch Maris who sent the news? Portia, who was sitting not far away, asked impatiently. It had to be said that her sense of smell in this area was quite sharp, and she guessed most of it right away. Andre could only smile helplessly in response to the lowly's sarcastic tone. He nodded. That's right. Maurice sent me the information that the Thornbird Guild will be holding an auction in the upper city 5 days later. I plan to go and take a look myself. Auction? Where is it? Portia's eyes glowed with excitement when she heard the word auction. Her occupational disease was clearly acting up. As the best thief in Valen City, she was constantly thinking about sneaking into the tightly guarded treasury and stealing everything of value. Now that she suddenly learned that an auction was about to be held, how could she sit still? Don't even think about it. There are enough things to do right now, and it's chaotic enough. Can't you stop for a few days? Andre wasn't an idiot. He could tell the other party's motive at a glance, and immediately slapped his forehead to reject her. As the plan to overthrow the rule of the Sardinia archipelago entered its final countdown, this chaos city would soon become the battlefield of the ambitious families. He didn't want to cause any more trouble at this time. Portia's eyes were still flickering, as if she wasn't willing to give up and was secretly plotting something. In order to ensure that nothing unexpected happened, Andre didn't say anything and directly activated the electric shock ability on his magic ring. The parchment was instantly set ablaze and turned into a pile of ashes in just a few seconds. After doing all this, he blew off the black ash on his finger and solemnly warned, "From now on, without my permission, you can't take a single step out of this warehouse, and you can't go out to steal. Otherwise, I swear I'll spank your ass. Do you remember that? Damn it, I'm not your slave, and I'm not your servant. You can't do this to me." Halflings were naturally active, and Portia's behavior was especially obvious. Asking her to stay in the house and not leave the house was probably worse than being imprisoned, so she immediately waved her little fists in resistance. Andre had already expected this little girl's reaction. He smiled and stretched out a finger. "A magic weapon. As long as you promise to do as I say, I'll create a powerful magic weapon for you. I guarantee it won't be inferior to Mabel's 2 great swords. Deal." Without any hesitation, Portia immediately rushed forward with her fastest speed and forcefully slapped Andre's palm. Not only was there not a trace of anger on her adorable baby face, but there was also a sly smile on her face. "Ha ha ha, you're really clever." Andre laughed and patted the little girl's head. Although he already knew that the angry look just now was just an act, he still felt that it was very interesting. Perhaps in terms of opportunism, there was no race in the whole of Orire that could compare to the Halflings. After dealing with Portia, it was already the latter half of the night. After simply scrubbing their bodies, everyone went into the basement to rest. In the huge warehouse, apart from the Black Panther sleeping in the corner, there was only Andre left. Although he was a little tired at the moment, he didn't have the slightest intention of sleeping. This was because Uhtred's spells were like a huge magnet, attracting all his attention. Especially the strange new spells. For a mage, they were simply a fatal temptation. Andre, who had been unable to study magic for more than half a month, instantly exploded with a terrifying enthusiasm for learning. He quickly analyzed one low-level arcane spell after another, and then copied them into his own spell book. He didn't feel the slightest bit sleepy, and similarly, he didn't feel the passage of time at all. Chapter 650. Learning magic was never a boring thing, especially when magical energy, under the guidance of incantations and gestures, could form all kinds of incredible physical phenomena, and even supernatural phenomena that could not be explained by science. Anyone with the slightest bit of curiosity could not help but want to know what was hidden behind these spells, and what was the magical energy that was everywhere, creating fire, acid, lightning, sound waves, ice out of thin air, summoning all kinds of strange creatures from all over the world, forcibly changing the mind and soul of a person, or even a group of people, and making them submit to one's will, resurrecting dead creatures in the form of ghosts, creating illusions that could deceive, all sensory organs, making oneself invulnerable to weapons, the ability to change the form of all known substances, and finally, the means to explore all the secrets of the world. Magic was all-encompassing and almost omnipotent. The ancient sorcerers seemed to have completely let go of the shackles of their minds, and with their wild imagination, they created thousands of arcane spells. There was nothing that they couldn't do. Many times, Andre always had an illusion that the magic civilization destroyed by the gods was far more advanced than the 21st century Earth. At least the Earth had not colonized the sky, but the floating city of the ancient magic civilization could already perform interplane teleportation and spread their fame throughout the universe. Countless worlds were conquered and colonized by them. It was these great pioneers that made the phrase "knowledge is power" no longer an empty abstract concept, but a real reflection of the profession of sorcerers. Perhaps the theocracy was born to be in conflict with the mortals who longed for the truth. It was the case on Earth, and it was also the case in the other world. When a mortal civilization developed to a certain extent and knew more and more, the theocracy would feel a great threat. The only difference was that the theocracy on Earth was just a group of greedy swindlers, while the gods in Orion had the power to destroy the world. The former was gradually swept into the garbage heap of history and became the topic of conversation and jokes after meals, especially the various kinds of dark history. It would take more than 3 days and 3 nights to finish talking about. The latter directly used all the power to completely wipe out the threat. Now, except for a few scholars and sorcerers, almost no one remembered the oldest empire of mankind. Exclaiming about the glory of the ancient magic civilization and feeling sorry for the destruction of such a splendid civilization, Andre finally finished learning and copying more than 20 new spells before the last bit of his energy and physical strength was exhausted. As he flipped through the pages of the Grade 5 Arcana techniques that he had just copied down, an unhealthy flush appeared on his pale face as his eyes shone with unprecedented satisfaction. It was common knowledge that magic was divided into 9 levels, excluding the level 0 tricks that even an apprentice could perform, and level 5 happened to be in the middle. At the same time, it was also a huge divide. If level 1 and level 2 spells were equivalent to firearms, then level 3 and level 4 spells were equivalent to rocket launchers. However, from level 5 onwards, spells would rise from individual weapons to tactical weapons such as missiles. For mages who possessed such power, the laws and morals of the mortal world would no longer bind them. The only thing that could restrict them, apart from greater power, was self-restraint. Andre took a deep breath and muttered to himself as he gently stroked the complex patterns on the pages that flickered with arcane light. Power. This is the power I've been pursuing. What a wonderful feeling. But it's still not enough. I need more. Much more. I want to learn all the magic in this world. I want to use my own method to uncover the mystery behind the illusion. I don't know if you can unravel the mystery behind the illusion, but I do know that if you don't sleep now, you'll probably die soon. Bortia, who had appeared out of nowhere, winked at him with a mischievous smile. She was holding a large plate of plump, tender, and delicious crabs. With a crack, she broke one of the pincers and ate it with relish. Halflings were a race that loved to enjoy themselves and had no resistance to good food and wine. As long as the conditions allowed, they could even eat continuously for an entire day. Many nimble halflings were eaten like this and turned into round meatballs. Of course, due to Bortia's frequent activities, she maintained her figure quite well and didn't have to worry about gaining weight for the time being. But once her weight started to increase rapidly, it meant that she would no longer be able to become an outstanding thief. Andre raised his head and glanced at the bright sunlight outside the window. He immediately closed the spellbook and shook his head with a wry smile. It's already noon? I didn't expect time to pass so quickly. I actually didn't sleep for an entire night. An entire night? The corner of Bortia's mouth twitched slightly. She then shook the crab pincers in her hand. No. You didn't sleep for an entire night. To be exact, you didn't sleep for 2 days and 2 nights. Did you know? The concentration and craziness you displayed when you were researching magic was simply frightening. You didn't eat, drink, sleep, or even go to the toilet for more than 40 hours. Heavens, I don't even know what words to use to describe that kind of madness. Are all mages like you? Monsters through and through? Sorry, I used the word monster, but I can't help it. Apart from monster, I can't find any other word to describe your previous state. How is it? Do you feel hungry, thirsty, and want to go to the toilet or sleep now? Noticing that the big-breasted lowly was staring at him with a mixture of curiosity, surprise, and strangeness, Andre suddenly had the urge to push her to the ground and give her a good beating. Fortunately, he managed to resist in the end. He only extended a finger and poked her forehead. On the contrary, I really want to use a spell to seal your mouth so that my ears can have some peace. Uh-huh. Don't be angry. I'll treat you to crabs. You know, these are spider crabs that are unique to the Sardinia Islands. 10 of them cost half a gold coin. Fiona just bought them this morning, and they're very fresh. Seeing a flash of irritation in Andre's eyes, Portia immediately gave up on getting to the bottom of the matter and changed the topic to food. Being quick-witted, she didn't want to argue with a person who hadn't slept for 2 days and 2 nights. After all, anyone who didn't rest for such a long time would inevitably have a bad temper. At this time, anyone who bumped into the muzzle of a gun would be unlucky. Chapter 651. No, thank you. I just want to go to bed and sleep right now. Remember, you have to wake me up in 8 hours, regardless of whether I've rested well or not. Also, for your safety, don't touch the things on the table. Otherwise, you might be killed by the magical energy that has gone out of control or turn into some strange form. After saying that, Andre put away the 2 most dangerous magic books. He blinked his tired eyes and kept yawning. Then, he turned around and walked to his bed in the basement. 2 days and 2 nights of high concentration had exhausted all of his mental and physical strength. Even though he was already a half-elemental life form, he still needed to eat, drink, and poop as long as his body hadn't entered the realm of the extraordinary. He still needed to rest and sleep. There was no helping it. It was a biological necessity. Portia greedily swept her eyes over the colorful potions and scrolls on the table and couldn't help but lick her lips. She didn't know if it was because of her occupational habit or because the crab meat was too delicious. Fortunately, she quickly resisted the temptation of the magical items, and her gaze didn't linger for too long. She raised her head and shouted at Andre's back. Hey, your pet cat came back last night. She told us to tell you that the plan is going smoothly and that you'll see the results tonight. Got it. Andre waved his hand without looking back and dove into the dim staircase. A few minutes later, light snoring sounds came from the basement. Uh-huh, he's finally asleep. It's time for me to work now. Portia excitedly threw the plate to the side and rubbed her greasy hands on her pants. She quickly jumped onto the table and carefully picked through the pile of magic potions. After a short while, she found 2 bottles of dark blue potions. Gazing at the faint halo emitting from the glass bottles, a beautiful arc appeared at the corner of her mouth. She muttered to herself in a voice that only she could hear. Awesome! There are 2 bottles of healing potions. Threatening the best thief in Valen City with words alone is not enough. I'm not an idiot who knows nothing about magical potions. Roar! Roar! Just as the big-breasted lowly was feeling proud of herself, the big black cat had appeared behind her without a sound. It let out 2 low growls, as if it was despising her for stealing. Go away, you disgusting charcoal head. Pushing the large head of the Black Panther away forcefully, Bordia quickly stuffed the potion into her pouch, not giving anyone the chance to take advantage of her. The arrogant cat looked at the halfling with contempt. While the halfling was not paying attention, she picked up the crab on the plate and ran away. In the blink of an eye, she had rushed out of the hall and disappeared into the backyard. Dumbfounded, Portia could not believe that a leopard could be so smart and so shameless. More importantly, as an outstanding bandit, she had her food stolen right under her nose by a wild beast. What a great humiliation! She felt that her dignity and intelligence had been seriously challenged. Intolerable. Absolutely intolerable. Nothing could infuriate a halfling more than snatching away a delicacy. In just a few seconds, Portia's slightly chubby face turned red. Then, her ear-piercing screams could be heard throughout the old warehouse. Bastard! Egg! Stinky cat! You're dead meat today. I want to peel off your skin and make a pair of boots. Roar, roar, roar. The Black Panther obviously did not fall for this threat and immediately retaliated with a roar full of provocation. As the saying goes, Mars collided with Earth. Since these two arrogant fellows were unwilling to lower their heads, the result was naturally predictable. Mabel, who was in the middle of forging, only saw a blurry figure flash past him. Immediately, the backyard was filled with sounds of chaos. Looking at the chaotic scene in the yard, he shook his head with a wry smile and muttered softly, "Heavens, someone come and help stop these two. Otherwise, it won't be long before the entire house is torn down." While the halfling and the Black Panther were playing out in the old warehouse, a terrifying conspiracy was brewing in a dilapidated wooden house located at the docks of Valen City. "Speak. Why did you call me here in such a hurry?" "I'll say the ugly words first. If it involves the guild's internal secrets, I won't reveal a single word," a man wrapped in a cloak from head to toe said in a hoarse voice unhurriedly. He looked somewhat thin and weak, giving off a feeling that he could not even stand up to a gust of wind. However, if one looked closely, they would discover that his hands were very special. Especially his knuckles. They were about twice as thick as a normal person's. Anyone with a little bit of combat knowledge would know that such a hand must be firm and powerful and could easily snap an opponent's neck. Another man in a white shirt leaned forward slightly and shrugged with a smile on his face. "Hee, Yurik, you don't need to be so cautious. Haven't we always had a pleasant cooperation before? You should know that in the entire city, there's no one other than me who can satisfy your perverted desires." "Perverted? No, Casimir, compared to a demon in human skin like you, my little hobby is nothing. I only torture the bodies of my victims, while you sacrifice their souls to hell. Stop fooling around. I'm really busy these few days and don't have the time to keep wasting time with you." The man called Yurik smacked the table with a cold smile, expressing his impatience and calling out the other's nickname at the same time. In reality, the two people in this room weren't nobodies. The former was the #1 assassin of the Underground Guild, the bloodthirsty demon Yurik, who was known for his cruel methods of torturing captives. Just as it had been unintentionally mentioned in their conversation, this guy was a complete pervert. His sensory organs were different from normal people's, so he could hear many sounds that others could not. This was especially so for the fact that captive screams would change slightly according to the degree of pain they were in. This fascinated him, and he had to listen to them every once in a while, or else he would immediately lose sleep. Sitting across from Yurik was the famous demon captain, Casimir Kiz. Behind him was a young and beautiful woman, the lustful demon that had been summoned to the material world not long ago. Without a doubt, the two of them were here for only one purpose, and that was to obtain information. After all, demons were not demons who did as they pleased. Generally speaking, they did not like to break existing rules. Instead, they used loopholes in the rules to make full use of threats, intimidation, deceit, and other means to force the enemy to compromise at the negotiation table. As for violence, they would only use it when they had no other choice. Chapter 652. Ha 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 ha. Busy? Let me guess. You must have been troubled by the endless attacks on the streets recently, right? Casimir opened his arms and asked with a hearty laugh. Hearing such a teasing tone, Yulik's expression instantly turned gloomy. He lifted his head slightly and glared at Casimir threateningly. "Do you know something? If you do, you'd better tell me quickly. Otherwise, you'll be in big trouble once the leaders receive the news. You should know that they aren't as easy to talk to as I am." Casimir smiled playfully, not minding Yulik's threat at all. He even extended a finger and tapped it rhythmically on the table. No, my dear friend. This isn't the attitude you should have when asking for help. Everything in the world needs to be reciprocated in order to form a transaction. Just like our previous cooperation, I provide you with fresh lives, and you use your hobby to make the sacrifice more perfect. But now, you actually want me to provide such important information for free. I have to say that this is really too disappointing. As a friend and business partner, I have to remind you that your thinking is very dangerous and can easily affect our good relationship. Of course, if you're willing to pay a price, such as sharing certain information, then I can immediately give you a clue. To be precise, I can give you a suspect. How about it? This suggestion isn't bad, right? The silent, lustful demon stared at Casimir with a sweet smile. A trace of surprise flashed in her eyes. She didn't expect a mere agent to be able to display the art of language to such a high standard, especially when he was able to grasp the other party's weakness. Even in hell, there weren't many lower and middle demons who could do this. As everyone knew, demons were worthy of being called Grandmasters in the field of deception. Even their words were often highly misleading. One had to be extremely alert when speaking to them. The slightest carelessness could cause one to fall into a meticulously woven trap. It was obvious that Casimir, who was known as a demon in human skin, was exceptionally proficient in this field. Not only did his short sentences pique Ulick's interest, but he also inadvertently hinted that no matter what clues he gave, the Underground Guild would mobilize all forces to investigate. Friend? Sorry, I don't deserve that title. I remember the last unlucky fellow you called friend didn't end up well. Cut the crap and name your price. Since this is a trade, let's follow the trade process. Ulick sneered. To be able to become the ace assassin of an underground guild, he naturally wouldn't be like those brainless idiots. Similarly, he knew very well what kind of person the person sitting in front of him was. Oh, your words really hurt my heart. Casimir clutched his chest and assumed a disgusting posture. But fortunately, this posture only lasted for less than a second before it was replaced by laughter. Ha. It took him a while to suppress the bloodthirsty impulse in his heart. He raised his head and asked in a guarded tone, "This is why you didn't leave with the fleet and instead secretly stayed behind by yourself?" Casimir shrugged and replied, "That's right. I saw a better opportunity. As long as I did it properly, I could have a brighter future. You know that I've never seen myself as a pirate. The only reason I chose this profession was because it could provide me with a lot of convenience." Very good. I'll immediately return to report the situation to the leaders and then arrange for another probe. If the information you provided is correct, then I guarantee that you'll have a bright future. With that, Ulick took a deep breath, stood up, pulled his hood tight, and jumped out of the back window, disappearing at the end of the alley in the blink of an eye. Chapter 653. After watching the ace assassin of the Underground Guild leave, Casimir propped his chin on his hand and asked playfully, "Do you think he believed what I said just now?" The lustful demon walked with elegant and seductive steps to the side of the chair and sat down. She shrugged nonchalantly. It's not a matter of whether he believes it or not. It's a matter of whether he has to believe it. With the current situation, anyone with half a brain would be able to sense that there's a huge conspiracy brewing in the shadows of this city. It's a conspiracy against the Underground Guild. No matter how bizarre the clues we give them are, they'll use the fastest method to investigate until they find out who the real enemy is. Your performance just now was not bad. At least I could sense the true fury of that mortal. Our enemy is going to be in big trouble soon. Trouble? Casimir shook his head with a cold smile. Although I also hope that Ulrich can get rid of that young mage, it's a pity that it's not very realistic. He's just a pawn used to test the waters, a bait used to divert attention. From a certain perspective, this is equivalent to gathering information. Do you understand? You seem to be very wary of your opponent. The lustful demon's senses were very sharp. She instantly caught a flash of nervousness, and her eyes released a dark red evil light. Casimir sighed slightly. He didn't admit or deny it. In fact, he didn't reveal all the details to prevent the lustful demon from having other thoughts if she knew too much. He especially couldn't reveal the half-elf Orlando's existence. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. Even though demons were creatures of order, they would never mind changing their allegiance. A mage who was half a step into the legendary realm was more tempting than a devil's agent. Casimir was willing to bet his head that if a devil had to choose between him and Olido, the devil would definitely choose the latter. All right. It seems like I guessed correctly. You're really wary of him, and even a little afraid. It's all right. The entire multiverse knows that spellcasters are the most difficult enemies to deal with. It's not a bad thing to be cautious. The lustful demon decisively changed the topic after realizing that the atmosphere was a little off. Even though she wanted to dig out more useful information, it wouldn't be worth it if she ruined their good working relationship. Demons, they never lack patience. Their near limitless lifespan allowed them to hide in the darkness for hundreds of years and meticulously plan a scheme. That was why this beautiful, lustful demon was not in a hurry at all. However, Casimir clearly didn't have that much time. In a few days, it would be time for him to offer his soul to the great demon, Count Nemoku. If he couldn't retrieve the important item by then, the consequences would be 10,000 times more severe than death. He couldn't help but shudder at the thought of his soul being locked in the torture room of hell and being tortured all the time. He hurriedly took a deep breath and ordered in a low voice, "Go and keep an eye on the target for me. When the battle breaks out, be sure to record everything you see and hear. Remember, I said all of them. Not a single detail can be left out." "Understood. I will bring back everything you want." The lustful demon left behind a meaningful look before disappearing. At the same time, in a cave on the outskirts of Valen City, a group of young and energetic ratmen had just received their weapons and armor. They were all extremely excited. Even though the Underground Guild had completely sealed off the Ratmen gang's territory due to the tense confrontation not long ago, they had no idea that these radical little fellows had long since dug out a tunnel that led outside of the blockade. The fully armed Paddy Ecleus clenched his fists and stood on a table, shouting excitedly, "Brothers, my dearest, dearest brothers, today is a great day. We have finally obtained the weapons and equipment that we have always dreamed of. We can finally take revenge on those executioners who killed our loved ones. I believe that you have all felt the enemy's malice these past few days. Not only have they sealed off our territory, they have also attempted to launch an attack and annihilate us all. The fact have proven that there is no possibility for us to coexist with the Underground Guild. This is war, a war of life and death. Well said. Slaughter those despicable bastards. I've had enough of being a coward all day long. An eye for an eye, blood for blood." Due to being suppressed for a long time, these young ratmen between the ages of 15 and 20 had been holding back their anger for a long time. Now that they had finally found a way to vent, it was as if they had gone completely crazy and had no reason to speak of. Affected by their emotions, Paddy's blood rushed to his head. He raised his hands high and continued to roar. "That's right. The humiliation we have suffered can only be washed away with blood. At night, I will lead you in an attack. Our target is Jerome Tubson. I believe that none of you have forgotten this name. He is the bastard who brought people into the docks a few years ago and killed at least 20 of our loved ones. Today, we don't need to restrain ourselves, nor do we need to tolerate. There is only slaughter and death. You can kill every enemy you meet, no matter if they are old, women, or babies. Just like what the Underground Guild did to us in the past. Kill them all. My grandfather is already old. He fears the strength of the enemy. He fears the sacrifice and pain. He only thinks of how to protect his own clan. But I won't. I'm still young. I don't fear any enemy. I'm willing to accept any form of sacrifice, even if I have to sacrifice myself. Now, eat to your heart's content. Drink." After eating and drinking to our heart's content, we will embark on the path of no return. Perhaps many of us will die, but I promise once again that every sacrifice will not be in vain, because I firmly believe that the final victory will belong to us. Victory will belong to us. All the young people below raised the wine glasses in their hands and let out a deafening roar in unison. They had no idea what this meant, nor did they know how great of a crisis they would bring to their clan. Mia, who was hiding in a dark corner, silently watched the scene in front of her. The corners of her mouth curled up slightly as she muttered to herself, "What a bunch of idiots who are easily swayed by emotions." But for me, The more brainless they are, the easier it is to control them. Since the chess pieces are in place, I should prepare for the next step of the plan. As soon as she finished speaking, she quickly transformed into a catman and quietly exited the cave, running quickly toward the city. Chapter 654. Sunrise and Sunset, the world's eternal and unchanging trajectory. Night arrived as expected as the sun disappeared below the horizon, once again shrouding the skies of Valen City and casting a faint shadow over the restless city. Especially in recent times, the shadow web had purposely created all sorts of assassinations and destruction, seriously touching on the sensitive nerves of the underground guilds. Many guild members didn't even dare to go out on the streets after dark out of fear of dying for no reason. In just 2 short days, the territory under their control had shrunk by a third, and this third of their territory had become a land of chaos with no order at all. Countless ambitious fellows took advantage of the situation, killing each other and fighting for territory. No matter who emerged as the final victor, it would mean the birth of a brand new power within the city. This wasn't good news for the leaders of the underground guilds. After all, Valen City was only so big, and every additional competitor was a great threat to their interests and authority. Thus, they were all racking their brains to find just who was challenging the current order and the authority of the underground guilds. Unfortunately, there were no witnesses, no corpses, and no traces of a fight. Even if Holmes were here, he could only stare at the scene helplessly. The spies they'd send out seemed to have mysteriously vanished from the face of the earth. After a few hours, their heads would be hung in very conspicuous places for passers-by to see. It had to be said that this was a blatant slap to the underground guild's faces, and a vicious slap at that. Half of the city's residents knew that they were losing absolute control over the streets and alleys, and that a new reshuffling of power was about to begin. But through this incident, the senior members of the guilds quickly recognized one fact, and that was that the enemy this time was definitely not to be trifled with. They had to unite and go all out. Near Sargasso Alley, a group of masked men wearing tight black leather armor and wielding daggers and short swords silently surrounded the old warehouse that Andre had bought as a temporary base. At the same time, they sent out their companions who were armed with crossbows to occupy advantageous positions. It didn't take long for them to completely seal off the area. It was obvious that as long as one wasn't blind, they could easily tell that these well-trained fellows weren't here to greet them in a friendly manner. One of the men with fierce eyes lowered his voice and reported to the other man, "Boss, our men are in position, waiting for your orders at any time. Don't be in a hurry to make a move. Send 2 spies to test them. I'm not sure if the person inside is the target we're looking for." As he spoke, the man pulled down his black mask, revealing a thin face. It was the ace assassin of the underground guild, Ulrich. "Test. We can capture everyone inside and take them away. When we get back, we can interrogate them one by one. I believe that with your torture methods, no matter what secrets they are hiding in their heads, they will have to tell us clearly." The man obviously didn't understand his superior's thoughts. In his opinion, since so many people had been dispatched, capturing a few suspicious targets would be a piece of cake. Why bother? Ulrich shook his head expressionlessly and explained, "No, you don't understand. The person who provided the information this time was Casimir. I have a feeling that he didn't ask for an exorbitant price this time, so there must be some other motive behind it. Maybe it's a trap." "You mean he's using us?" The man's eyes widened in shock. "I don't know. If his thoughts were so easily seen through, he wouldn't be called a devil in human skin. Remember, find 2 quick-witted fellows. Before we launch the attack, I need to know who lives inside. Do you understand?" Ulrich's tone was very strict, and the expression on his face gave off an unquestionable feeling. "Understood. Don't worry, boss. I'll pick 2 good men." With that, the man patted his chest hard, turned around, and made a few hand gestures toward the roof. The 2 men in black instantly understood and quickly moved along the edge of the roof toward the warehouse. In the blink of an eye, they had snuck into the backyard. On the other side, Andre, who had just woken up from 8 hours of sufficient sleep, was sitting at the dining table. He sipped on the scalding bone broth as he stared at Bordia and the Black Panther, who were squatting in the corner, glaring at each other with a playful gaze. The two saboteurs had messed around in the afternoon and made a mess of the entire warehouse. Not only had they smashed the bottles and jars in the backyard into smithereens, but there were also several holes in the roof. Fortunately, there hadn't been any signs of rain in the past 2 days. Otherwise, there wouldn't even be a place to hide from the rain. Of course, if it was just a small matter, Andre wouldn't have bothered himself. The main thing was that the two of them had almost overturned the furnace used to forge iron. If something were to happen to this thing, everyone in the warehouse would be in trouble, especially since he was still sleeping in the basement. He might even be burned alive in his sleep. In order to teach the two troublemakers a lesson, he chose the famous electroshock therapy on Earth. He used an electric current that wasn't fatal to give them an unforgettable experience. The reason why they were so quiet now was actually because they were afraid of being electrocuted. How is it? Have the two of you realized your mistake? After drinking the last mouthful of soup in the bowl, Andre wiped his mouth with a handkerchief and asked calmly. Portia glared fiercely at the big cat. She pouted and didn't say a word, seemingly intending to remain silent. The Black Panther bared its teeth in disdain and also turned its head away, refusing to make a sound. Looking at their awkward looks, the liar Jace immediately laughed out loud. Ha ha ha, how childish. I think the lesson they received is obviously not enough. Maybe you could try to give them another electric shock. I believe that as long as they are electrocuted for a few seconds, they will be like children who have been beaten and admit their mistakes honestly. Shut up. If you dare to say another word, I promise to tear your mouth apart. Upon hearing the word electric shock, Portia's eyes were immediately filled with fear. She gritted her teeth and threatened Jace. The Black Panther was not to be outdone. It opened its bloody mouth and kept growling. Its two pale yellow eyes were overflowing with murderous intent. Don't be nervous, guys. Relax. Relax. I'm just joking. Jace, who realized that he was in a bad situation, quickly raised his hands and put on an innocent expression. As an ordinary person, he didn't want to provoke a ferocious Black Panther and an experienced high-level bandit. The former could tear a person's skin and flesh apart just by scratching with its claws. The latter was a master in the field of theft. If he didn't want his personal belongings to disappear without any reason, it was best to stay away from them. Chapter 655. The swindler's shameless reaction made Mabel, who was eating, unable to hold back. She spat out all the food in her mouth with her eyes wide open. It could be seen from his expression that he was completely stunned. He could not believe that Jace, who usually acted like an elder, would be so frightened by a little threat. Fiona was not much better. Her beautiful eyes revealed a look of disbelief. The only difference was that she covered her mouth with one hand in time to prevent the food from spitting out. Obviously, this pair of inexperienced siblings was deceived by Jace's disguise. At the same time, it also showed that he was indeed very talented in conversation and negotiation. In just over a day, he had established an image that was completely opposite to his own character in the minds of people who did not know him well. As for Jennifer, she held her chin and enjoyed the farce with a smile on her face. A trace of envy flashed in her red pupils. As a woman who was missing something important in her life, she liked the playful and warm scene in front of her very much. She even had the urge to join in. However, the cautiousness that had been trained in dangerous environments for a long time stopped her from acting irrationally at the critical moment. Perhaps this state would continue for a long time until the trauma left in her heart was completely healed. Andre narrowed his eyes and glanced at everyone. Soon, he smiled and shook his head, sighing inwardly. An excellent swindler, a simple-minded but powerful trainee warrior, a priest who is yet to complete his studies, a troublesome halfling thief, a Black Panther that is as smart as a human, a genius woman who has been greatly hurt emotionally and physically, and is now emitting a strange charm all the time. Finally, there's a cat person who is carrying out a plan outside. The teammates that he had gathered were all weirder and more unreliable than the other. Fortunately, there are still resources in the shadow web that can be used. Otherwise, let alone overthrowing the rule of the Sardinia Islands, it would be lucky if they could escape alive. Just as Andre was having a headache about how to deal with these two fellows who refused to admit their mistakes, the Black Panther, lying on the ground, suddenly tensed up all the muscles in her body. She stood up and looked at the backyard vigilantly. Portia also drew her weapon and entered combat mode at the fastest speed possible. The abnormal reaction of the two left the others in the room a little overwhelmed, especially Jays, who immediately opened his mouth to ask what happened. But before he could make a sound, Andre raised a finger and shook it gently. "Quiet. I think we have guests." As the soft whisper escaped from its mouth, the big cat, which was ready to strike, disappeared into the darkness. It silently moved along the places where the oil lamp couldn't reach, relying on the thick soles of the feline's feet. It was like a ghost, not making any sound. Portia, on the other hand, made use of her short stature and nimble movements to quickly approach the window. Then, she flipped sideways and entered the backyard from the other side. There was no communication and no so-called plan. The man and the panther were like close comrades who had worked together for many years. They chose their targets almost at the same time and launched an attack at lightning speed. The two masked men who had just sneaked into the backyard didn't even have time to react before they were pushed to the ground. One of the more unlucky ones tried to resist, but in the blink of an eye, his neck was bitten off by the big cat's sharp teeth. Blood splattered more than a foot high, and he took his last breath while twitching. As for the other companion who wanted to save him, before he could get up, he was kicked to the ground by Portia, who came out of the darkness. She then pounced on him and dislocated his elbow in a few moves. The whole process was neat and tidy. After the dust settled, he felt waves of pain coming from the dislocated joint. Unbelievable efficiency. The captive masked man couldn't believe that an owl like him, who was trained as an elite by the guild, couldn't even last one round. Asterisk clap. Clap. Clap clap. Asterisk. Just as the others were stunned, Andre stood up from his chair with a smile on his face. He applauded and praised. Perfect performance. Perfect enough to offset your destructive behavior in the afternoon. Okay, now quickly invite the remaining guest in. Be gentle. Don't accidentally kill him. I have some questions to ask him. Hee hee. No problem. I'll try to be gentle. Portia smiled cruelly and dragged the captive into the house by his hair. She was so rough that it made people's hair stand on end. There was no trace of gentleness. Of course, where there was oppression, there was resistance. The captive, who was in unbearable pain, opened his mouth and wanted to shout for help. In the end, he was ruthlessly kicked in the face by the small leather boots of the halfling. Several of his teeth were knocked out because of the impact with the ground, and his mouth was full of dark red blood. When the unlucky man was dragged to the center of the hall, his original face was no longer recognizable. His whole face was swollen like a loaf of bread. The Black Panther, who had bitten the man to death, followed closely behind. Although there was blood everywhere around its mouth, its steps were still light and graceful, as if it had just bitten a rabbit to death and not a dangerous enemy. Looking at the captive who was lying on the ground, vomiting blood, Andre picked up a table knife from the table beside him and gently slid his fingertips across the captive's face and neck. At the same time, he said in a tone that was a little like talking to himself, but also a little like chatting. Do you know, stranger friend, the human body is actually full of mysteries? Some parts of it are very strong enough to withstand huge injuries and not die, but some parts of it are extremely fragile. Once attacked, it often dies in an instant without even feeling the pain. For example, have you noticed this table knife in my hand? Yes, it's very short and not particularly sharp, but as long as I poke hard at your temple or jaw, your soul will immediately leave your body and go to another world. But if I stuff it into your nasal cavity and slowly cut open your nose, then not only will you not die, you will even suffer unbearable pain and torture. If it's the eyelids, the pain will be even more intense. A mere face is already so wonderful. What if it extends to the entire body? Believe me, dear friend, I'm quite knowledgeable in this field. I even have a way to cut open your stomach and let you see with your own eyes the beating heart, lungs, liver, gallbladder, intestines in your chest. How about it? Doesn't it sound very interesting? Do you want to experience it for yourself? It doesn't matter. Just tell me. No matter what you choose, I will fulfill your wish unconditionally. Chapter 656. Even though Andre's voice wasn't loud, and could even be described as gentle and refined, but the content of his words and the creepy smile on his face were enough to make people associate him with words like pervert, bloodthirsty, and lunatic. The captive was obviously frightened. His whole body was tightly curled into a ball, trying to find some sense of security in this position. His eyes were filled with fear as he desperately waved his hands and shouted, Get away! Get away from me! You demon!" Demon? No, my guess from afar. I was just explaining the physiological structure of the human body to you. How could it be related to a demon? You should know that this is very precious knowledge. Anyone who learns a little bit can immediately become the best first aid specialist. Of course, I could also be an interrogator or an executioner. Anyway, I have good intentions. Why are you afraid? Andre deliberately put on an innocent look to defend himself, but the table knife in his hand accurately stabbed into the captive's nose. In an instant, blood splattered everywhere. The poor captive only felt an indescribable pain and numbness rushing into his brain, followed by a heart-wrenching scream. Stop! 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 Ask me what you want to ask. I swear I'm willing to tell you anything, as long as you give me a quick death. Looking at the unlucky captive lying on the ground in agony, Andre smiled insincerely and spread out his hands. Oh, I'm so sorry. My hand accidentally slipped. Don't worry, the inside of the nose is one of the most sensitive areas of the human body. Although it will be very painful and uncomfortable, it won't endanger your life. Damn it! Damn it! Damn it! The poor captive cursed 3 times in a row. He covered his nose and hit his head hard on the ground, trying to distract himself from the pain. He was not a fool. Even a fool could see that the stab just now was definitely intentional. So he immediately classified the young man in front of him as extremely dangerous. He no longer had any hope of surviving and only wanted to die as quickly as possible so that he would not have to endure the terrible torture. Seeing the captive's hopeless expression, Andre's lips curled up slightly. He said in an indifferent tone, "What a pity. I originally wanted to explain more about the mysteries of the human body, how pain is transmitted to the brain through the nerves, how the internal organs work. Unfortunately, you don't seem to want to hear this. Well, since you're a guest, I'll reluctantly ask you a few questions. I hope you can give me a satisfactory answer. First of all, who are you and why are you in this old warehouse? Don't insult my intelligence by using the excuse of being a burglar. A real burglar wouldn't carry so many weapons, and it's even more impossible that they don't even have a lock-picking tool. Secondly, tell me how many of your accomplices are out there. Do you know from the moment you appeared, I smelled a conspiracy in the air. Maybe you think I'm dead for sure, but I have to say, the show has just begun. Hearing that, the captive ignored the snot, tears, and blood that were flowing everywhere. He raised his head and stared into Andre's eyes, trying to find any sign of guilt or weakness in his eyes. Unfortunately, in the end, he only saw a face with a fake smile. He couldn't even feel any emotion, let alone guilt. It was as if his entire person was wearing a mask and all his thoughts were hidden. Realizing that he couldn't find any flaws, the 30-year-old captive lay down again and sighed in despair. Sigh, looks like I've been cursed by the goddess of misfortune today. There's no chance of me surviving. That's right, I'm not a thief, but an owl directly under the guild. My goal here is simple, and that's to capture people. In order to ensure that nothing goes wrong, the boss is personally leading the team. A total of 40 people have already surrounded this small alley. Maybe you're all ruthless characters, but there's no way you'll be able to escape. Oh, People from the Underground Guild. Andre raised his eyebrows in surprise. He didn't quite understand where he'd exposed himself to attract the attention of the Underground Guild. Do you know how big the trouble is now? Our boss is Ulick. I'm sure you've heard of his great name. No one in Valen City has been able to escape his pursuit. Perhaps because he knew that he was going to die without a doubt. The man simply let go of all his mental restraints and started sweeping his gaze over everyone present with a look of pity. He was well aware of his boss's perverted habits, especially the mutilated corpses in the dungeon. Anyone who saw them would have nightmares. Bordia had obviously heard of Ulick. 2 rays of cold light flowed out of her eyes as she lowered her voice and said to everyone, "If this guy isn't lying, then I'm afraid we'll have to make preparations for a bloody battle this time." The Owl is a small assassination team that the Underground Guild has secretly nurtured and is responsible for eradicating the enemy. Perhaps 1 or 2 wouldn't be a big deal, but once the number exceeds 10, it'll immediately become very difficult to deal with. As for the Bloodbath Maniac, there's no need to even mention him. There's no record of him surviving until now. What? Heavens! What should we do? What should we do? The most cowardly swindler, Jess, was scared out of his wits when he heard Ulick's name and started screaming in panic. But this wasn't to be expected. After all, the Underground Guild had purposely leaked this number 1 assassin's perverted behavior in order to better intimidate the enemy. Over time, this name possessed some kind of mysterious magic. It could be used to stop babies from crying and to refresh the mind. It was said that even drunkards would instantly sober up after hearing this name. From a certain perspective, the name Ulick had already become synonymous with fear in Valen City. Relax, there's no need to make yourself so nervous. I guarantee that this Ulick guy is far inferior to Sam. I'll give you all 5 minutes to pack your things. After 5 minutes, we'll kill our way out of the main entrance and destroy all obstacles along the way. Since the Underground Guild has already sensed my existence, then I'll generously stand out and hand them a letter of challenge. With that, a trace of a chilling madness appeared in Andre's eyes. Ever since the fierce battle with the Ghost King Navid Rusta, he'd been suppressing all the emotions that could lead to impulsiveness. The accumulation of emotions had almost reached a critical point, so he wanted to use this opportunity to vent and let everyone in the city know that a power that dared to directly challenge the Underground Guild had appeared. Chapter 657. War was the highest and most violent way to resolve disputes and conflicts. Its nature was filled with blood and slaughter. Even the smallest scale of war could cause extremely terrifying destruction. Any violent act that could be labeled with this word usually meant extremely serious consequences. Of course, for those who desired fame, wealth, and power, war was an excellent opportunity. Without a doubt, from the moment the guild discovered the old warehouse, Andre had already made preparations for war. Even though it was an underground war that could not be brought to the surface, war was war. He could even feel that some of the male genes in his body were rapidly awakening, like a ferocious beast waiting to devour fresh life. Men, especially men who were physically and mentally healthy. Generally speaking, deep down in their hearts, they yearned for war. At least, that was the case before the war caused them great physical and mental harm. This was because this was a primitive instinct that had been lurking in the blood of humans for thousands of years. It was the embodiment of the law of the jungle and the survival of the fittest. Just like the lions on the grasslands, stronger and smarter individuals could occupy more lionesses and spread their excellent genes. Humans used the same cruel method to filter out better genes so that they could reproduce more outstanding offspring. 5 minutes passed quickly. Knowing that the situation was urgent, they did not bring too many daily necessities. Instead, they armed themselves as best they could. Even Jennifer, who did not have the strength to truss a chicken, carried a short sword in her hand and a pot lid on her back as a shield. Don't think it's funny. In fact, the Oleocontinent's productivity was extremely poor. Many newbie adventurers started out with wooden axes, iron pots, pot lids, pitchforks, and kitchen knives that they'd brought from home. Looking at the various outfits of his teammates, Andre could not help but chuckle and shake his head. He stood up and asked, "Are all of you ready?" "Of course. My sword can't wait to drink the enemy's blood." Mabel clenched her fists and replied excitedly. Glancing at the excited young man, Portia shrugged her shoulders and reminded him, "Calm down, rookie. Nightingale is not the street thugs you've met before. Take care of yourself and don't lose your life." "Don't worry, I'll keep an eye on him," Jay stood up and said. Obviously, he was not doing this to help others, but to better protect himself. After all, Mabel was strong and wore heavy armor. Even if she could not effectively kill the enemy, she could still be a qualified shield. The swindler's little trick naturally could not fool the clever halfling thief. The latter rolled his eyes and did not say anything else. "All right, let's stop bickering. I'm sure the guests outside are getting impatient. You should know that it's very rude to keep guests waiting. Remember, no matter what, don't stay more than 3 meters away from me. Otherwise, you might be accidentally injured by my spells." After saying that, Andre instantly activated the 3 spells in the secondary defense staff, forming a blurry visual trap several meters around him. Anyone who stared at it for more than 10 seconds would immediately feel dizzy. Without any hesitation, he pushed open the door of the warehouse and went straight to the street. He bowed slightly to the enemy hidden in the darkness. "Welcome, welcome, guests from afar. To be honest, I didn't expect you to find me so quickly. Can you share with me who gave you the information?" Surprise! All the masked men hiding in the darkness were completely dumbfounded. They had carried out countless cleanup missions. Which one of them had not been scared out of their wits when they heard the name of the Night Owl? But now, there was actually someone who dared to stand up and ask. A few of the men occupying the high ground carefully raised their crossbows, waiting for the order to turn their target into a hedgehog. But unfortunately, they did not receive the order to attack even after raising their weapons until their arms were sore. Unlike most of his subordinates who had never seen the power of magic, Ulick recognized the strange phenomenon surrounding Andre's body at a glance. He understood that it was very likely some kind of powerful defensive spell. Furthermore, the spies he sent out had not made any movements until now. He was 100% sure that the other party had figured out the real situation of his side. There were only 2 possibilities for him to take the initiative to stand up in such a situation. One was that he had absolute confidence in his own strength and did not take the enemy seriously at all. The other was that he was an arrogant young mage who despised other professions from the bottom of his heart. Ulick did not intend to take the risk of launching an attack before he figured out the exact situation. At the very least, he would not do so before the effects of the spell wore off. Although the outside world often described him as a lunatic with a perverted hobby, he himself was very cautious. He never did anything he was not confident in. Otherwise, he would have long been plotted against and killed by his countless enemies. After standing in place for nearly a minute, Andre immediately realized what the enemy was up to. He smiled and spread out his hands. "All right, it seems that you were a little shy. No matter, as a hospitable host, I will reluctantly invite you all out." Just as he finished speaking, he suddenly raised his fireball staff embedded with rubies, aimed at a dilapidated wooden house not far away, and shot out a small, fatal fireball. Asterisk boom. Asterisk with a loud bang. The orange-red flames flew through the window and produced a terrifyingly high temperature. The entire house was set ablaze, and a few unlucky fellows who had not been able to dodge in time were completely swallowed up. They let out miserable cries. With his night vision, any enemy who tried to use the darkness to hide themselves could not escape Andre's eyes. Coupled with the fire elemental bloodline's amplification of fire magic, anyone who was hit by the fireball had no chance of surviving. Ulick could no longer sit still as the flames soared into the sky. He recognized this famous level 3 spell, and also knew the terrifying destructive power of the fireball spell. Thus, he immediately raised his hand and gestured for them to move forward. When the assistant beside him saw this, he immediately blew the whistle in his mouth. There were no blood-boiling shouts, nor were there any obvious signs. The masked men lurking in the alleyway attacked from all directions at lightning speed. The archers, in particular, shot arrows that were smeared with poison at the first moment. Just like their name, they were night owls in the darkness. Apart from stabbing their sharp blades into the enemy's body, they did not make any sound. But unfortunately, to Andre, who was protected by a defensive spell, the arrows were no threat at all. Most of them were misdirected by the blur spell, hitting the ground and walls. Some were deflected by the arcane shield. In the end, 1 or 2 arrows hit his body, but they were unable to penetrate the protection of the stone-skin spell. Under the powerful power of magic, physical attacks once again showed their extreme weakness. Even if he stood in place and let the enemy attack him for half a minute, he would not lose a single hair. Chapter 658. Ha 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 ha. That's right. That's how a good customer should behave. War, what an intoxicating word. Although I originally wanted to use a more peaceful method to deal with you, it seems that being more direct and violent would be more interesting, wouldn't it? Seeing the large group of masked men quickly approaching him, Andre did not show any signs of panic. Instead, he opened his arms wide and laughed heartily. However, if one looked closely, they would discover that his laughter hid a bloodlust and madness that was completely different from usual. He had completely released the negative emotions that had been suppressed by his rationality. Humans were not machines. No matter how strong a person's self-control was, they could not guarantee that they would always be under the control of their rationality. Thus, finding a way to vent was the way most people release their stress. Unfortunately, the Owl Squad of the Underground Guild had already become the target of Andre's venting. Since he was venting, his methods were naturally too gentle. More accurately, they were incomparably violent. Fireballs! 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 Fireballs the size of fists shot out from the tip of the magic staff, and an extremely terrifying scene unfolded. Deafening noises, blinding flames, terrifying explosions, and heat waves and shock waves that were enough to make one's hair stand on end. Countless enemies lost their precious lives in the blink of an eye, accompanied by pained cries. They were like moths flying into a flame. The only thing they could obtain from it was death. A massacre. It was a complete massacre. Andre used this bloody fact to remind everyone around him of why wizards were revered by the world, and why they had the privilege of breaking free from the shackles of the world's laws and morals. The reason was simple. Because of power. Because of unparalleled power. Apart from wizards, what other profession could give a mortal the power to rival a god, or even kill a god? Only a sorcerer could do that. The evoking arcane magic, known as the most destructive and visually beautiful of the 8 major magic elements, had finally revealed its most terrifying side. Without any protective measures, the human body could not withstand such terrifying power. The entire alley turned into a sea of fire in the blink of an eye, the raging flames lighting up the sky and earth. Many masked men who had been half-cooked howled in agony as they struggled to crawl. As they crawled, they breathed their last. Seeing this hellish scene, Ulik, who was standing at the back, couldn't help but tremble. In just a few minutes, less than 1/5 of his elite subordinates were left. The remaining 4/5 had all become incomplete charred corpses. The smell of roasted meat in the air was enough to make anyone nauseous. He was completely unreasonable and did not use any tactics. Andre continued to bombard the enemies with his staff. He had only released 20 fireballs, yet all of the enemies were basically annihilated. A large number of damage values appeared in his vision, and he received over 3,000 EXP in an instant. D-Devil, this guy was a demon in human skin. Ha 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 ha. One of the night owls who was lucky enough to survive was unable to withstand the huge mental impact. His rationality collapsed, and he went mad on the spot. He laughed maniacally as he raised the dagger and stabbed it into his own heart. A smile of relief appeared on his face as he fell to the ground with a plop. It was common knowledge that certain human emotions could infect the people around them, especially negative emotions such as pain and despair. After the first suicide, there was a second, third, and fourth. Soon, the remaining survivors followed in his footsteps and ended their lives with the weapons they carried with them. Oh, damn it. That unlucky bastard was right. He looks like a demon king that crawled out of a bottomless abyss. Fortunately, His Majesty the Demon King is now on our side. Portia's eyes widened as she muttered to herself. Even though she was also shocked by the sudden burst of power Andre had, the extraordinary courage unique to halflings allowed her to maintain a positive and optimistic spirit. Jace's reaction was the complete opposite. He greedily licked his lips and said in a hoarse voice, "No, my dear little friend, this is power, the power of magic. Look at how beautiful and enchanting it is. This power can bring us money, wealth, and power. I'll bet my head that there aren't many people in Valen City who can resist it." Don't be naive. Do you think the pirates can contend against Linton City for hundreds of years without the same power? Jennifer shot a glance at the greedy swindler and retorted with a serious expression. Perhaps ordinary people didn't know what the Sardinia Islands were capable of making Linton City fear them. But she had learned through Blackblade's intelligence system that there was a wizard tower hidden underground in this city. Although there weren't many spellcasters inside, there were still a few famous people. Of course, this name referred to their infamy. They had all committed unforgivable crimes, such as massacring over 100 people, controlling the undead to attack the living, releasing the latest plague in the city's wells, and so on. In short, it wasn't that they couldn't survive, and it was impossible for them to hide in a remote island and provide magic assistance to the pirates. While they were talking, Yurik suddenly came back to his senses and discovered that he was still in danger. He didn't hesitate at all and turned to run in the direction of the guild headquarters, not daring to stay for even a second. However, before he could run 10 meters, he suddenly hit an invisible wall and fell to the ground with a bang. A sharp pain came from his head and nose, and his eyes were seeing stars. He couldn't get up from the ground for a long time. Leaving without saying goodbye isn't the behavior of a polite guest. Don't you think so? Andre instantly moved to the front and lightly patted the invisible wall as he teased with a mocking tone. It was he who had activated the spell on his magic ring, creating an indestructible wall of force in the path of Yulik's escape. Based on inertia and the reaction force from the impact, no matter how strong the body was, it would still collapse. "Who are you?" Seeing that he couldn't escape, Yurik struggled to get up, tensing all the muscles in his body as he asked carefully. Andre raised a finger and shook it with a smile. "I'm sorry, dear customer. You seem to have misunderstood something. I'm the only one who has the right to ask questions, and you're responsible for answering them. You should know that I have no intention of killing you so far. So please cooperate as much as possible and don't give me any excuses. This is a good thing for both of us, isn't it?" Chapter 659. Yulik cautiously took 2 steps back, his eyes fixed on the ruby-inlaid wand. He knew that this little magic item was truly deadly. After a full minute of silence, he asked, "Why should I believe that you're not lying?" "Lying to you?" Andre's eyes flashed with a strange light, followed by a contemptuous smile. "Haha, I have to say, you're a classic fool. First of all, do you think I need to lie to you in the current situation? I can pull your soul out of your body and slowly torture you for the information I want. Believe me, that kind of torture is far crueler and more painful than any torture in the world. No one can keep a secret after tasting it. Secondly, as I said, you've already lost the right to choose. You can either answer my questions and live, or keep your mouth shut and die with your subordinates. Finally, do you know why I want you to stay? Because I need someone with enough status to go back and hand in a letter of challenge to the guild leaders. Tell them that a war to the death has begun." After hearing this, Yulik's pupils shrank and dilated. Then he gasped for breath and shouted, "Are you crazy? You want to become enemies with the entire guild? We're the supreme rulers of this city. For hundreds of years, no one has been able to threaten our position. You have no idea how powerful we are. Every guild leader has unimaginable resources in their hands. But before he could finish, Andre impatiently waved his hand. Stop. I'm not interested in listening to these meaningless boasting. Powerful? No one can threaten your ruling position? That's the funniest joke I've ever heard. If it weren't for the help of the pirates during the rat disaster decades ago, you would have become history. Old Bernie is working with you. Ulick suddenly remembered the news that the dark enforcers of the guild had sent back a few days ago. His face was quickly filled with unconcealable shock. The rat men had always been a thorn in the side of the leaders. They were like a dormant volcano or a hidden plague. Once they erupted, it usually meant terrible consequences. Those who had experienced the riot back then would never be able to forget the terrible scene in their minds for the rest of their lives. Now, with the addition of a powerful mage, the situation was really grim. What do you think? Andre didn't answer the question directly, but asked playfully. At this time, he did not forget to drag the Rat King down with him. It could be said that he was quite sinister. After all, in many cases, an ambiguous answer would often give people ample room for imagination, releasing the wrong inducement signal. Looking at Ulick's eyes, it was clear that he already believed that Old Bernie had chosen to become enemies with the Union this time. Smelling the aroma of meat in the air and the burnt smell of the wooden house, Andre suddenly noticed two figures in the distant sky. Although they were a little blurry and weren't flying very fast, there was no doubt that they were coming this way. He did not dare to delay and immediately turned to the halfling bandit behind him and shouted, "Portia, immediately take everyone to find Mia. Remember, leave this area as fast as you can. No matter what happens, don't look back. The next battle isn't something you can participate in." "What's wrong? Is there a troublesome enemy coming?" Portia asked in surprise. It was the first time she saw Andre so nervous. Even when facing more than 40 night owls, he still maintained a relaxed smile, but now he was telling them to escape. "It's a mage. The enemy's mage is coming. Run. Otherwise, we won't be able to leave." Andre didn't have time to talk nonsense. He quickly took out a protection scroll and activated it. A dazzling light flashed, and his whole body split into 7, each one exactly the same as before. Without a doubt, this was a level 2 illusion spell, Mirror Image. It could create 1 to 4 illusions at random, and one would be added for every 3 levels of the mage. It was one of the best methods to confuse the enemy and was very popular among low-level mages. However, a mere mirror image was obviously not enough to deal with the upcoming Arcane duel. So after completing this spell, Andre didn't stop. He also cast Flame Shield and Arcane Vision on himself. The former could offset most of the fire damage, and at the same time burn the enemies who rushed close to him. The latter allowed his eyes to see all the magic light. It could roughly determine the effect of more than 90% of the magic items based on the color and light intensity of each item. A duel between high-level mages wasn't child's play. A single mistake in judgment could lead to unexpected and serious consequences. Therefore, protection and detection were especially important. If one couldn't predict the next step of the opponent, or even a few steps, they would immediately fall into a passive situation. Seeing Andre casting arcane spells one after another, Portia quickly realized the seriousness of the situation. Without saying anything, she directly led everyone to the most crowded area in the lower city. She knew that Mia had a shabby hut nearby that could be used to hide. Time passed in the blink of an eye. As Andre finished chanting the last spell, the figures in the sky got closer and clearer. They could even see their faces clearly. One of them looked to be in his 40s. His entire head was bald, including his eyebrows. All the hair had been shaved off. His face, head, and neck were densely covered with tattoos. His 2 dark green eyes were very sharp. Through arcane vision, one could see that these tattoos were all emitting a strong black light. The other one had white hair and a beard, giving the illusion of an honest elder. However, the human skull hanging on his neck revealed his bloodthirsty and cruel nature. Perhaps to most selfish mages, using the body of their own kind to make magic items was nothing. After all, It was just a shell left behind after the death of a living creature. However, this skull was different. It imprisoned a soul that was struggling in pain. In other words, when the magic item was made, this person's head was cut off while he was still alive and then processed with necromancy spells. The poor soul was constantly in pain, and this pain was the source of the magic item's power. Toying with the souls of the dead was an evil taboo, whether it was the nobles who controlled the secular world or the churches of good gods who controlled the divine right. It was still fine to secretly study it in the wizard tower, but to wear it on one's body and parade it around the city was definitely a blatant provocation. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.